Chapter 281. Greene's Next Step. In the Duke's study room in Eagle's Nest City, Greene Kleb, Baron Grevan, and Maester Erlin were discussing the governance of the valley. Maester Erlin turned over the note in his hand and said, "My lord, according to the report from the acting governor of Seagull Town, the musicals and dances in Seagull Town have been promoting your reputation and kindness recently. Most of those troops are from the Reach." Looking at the note again, he continued, "The acting governor reported that 16 theater troupes from the Reach have booked almost all the stages in Seagull Town, and they are full of performances every day. In addition to the stages for the nobles, the open-air stage in the square does not charge a bronze star from visitors, and even distributes free bread to attract people. He suspects that this is a deliberate arrangement, but the real purpose of those people has not yet been investigated." Grevan Hershey looked at Maester Erlin in confusion. "Erlin, has the specific employer been investigated in Seagull Town?" Maester Erlin shook his head slightly. "The messenger crows in Seagull Town have not sent any other information. We only know that they are all from the Reach." Baron Grevan thought for a moment and said, "It can also be said that they have already told us the answer. The employers of those theater troupes are probably from the Reach." Greene's calm voice interjected, "It's the Tyrell family from the Reach." "Golden Rose?" Baron Grevan said in surprise. Greene tapped his chin thoughtfully. "The friendship between Marigolds and Golden Roses is profound." The corners of his mouth curved slightly as he added, "Previously, most of the military rations of the Kleb Corps came from the generous support of the Golden Rose." Baron Grevan was startled and tried hard to suppress a smile. "My lord, you and Duke Tyrell—" Before he could finish, Greene said, "Military victory is the most important step." He tapped his fingers on the wide armrest. "Now, the Red Keep has the support of Queen Cersei and King Joffrey, and we have the support of the Duke of Highgarden in the south. No one can shake Kleb's rule in the valley." After Greene's words fell, Baron Grevan said, "My lord, you will always be the master of the valley. The Hershey family will always be at your disposal and will always be loyal to you. The gods in heaven bear witness." Maester Erlin echoed, "You have opened a new chapter in a great history, my lord." Greene's eyebrows raised slightly. Sure enough, compared to the vassals of the Crabclaw Peninsula, the vassals of the valley were more educated. He motioned to Brienne to pour wine for the three of them and said, "There is still one piece of paper left before Kleb's legal rule." Maester Erlin said, "The legitimacy recognized by the king and the royal council is conducive to your rule in the valley." "Thank you." Greene picked up the wineglass Brienne had filled, took a sip, and said, "So, we are going to help Prime Minister Tywin in the Riverlands. This will make things easier." Grevan nodded in agreement, but Maester Erlin hesitated. "My lord, if you want to start a war, I suggest you wait for a while, at least until the harvest season in the valley is over." He raised his eyes and glanced at the silent Greene, then continued, "It is best to wait until the end of the tourney at the Gate of the Moon. At that time, there will be new knights loyal to you and belonging to you." Licking his dry lips, he added, "The flat land in the Riverlands is very suitable for cavalry to gallop." Baron Grevan looked at the wrinkled Maester Erlin, glared and said, Master Greene is invincible." Regarding Baron Grevan's words, Maester Erlin did not argue. The Maester was the Lord's advisor, and he was just fulfilling his duties. "The tourney at the Gates of the Moon is important. Westerling, she has been attacked by the king in the north so many times that she has lost count." Robb chuckled, his eyes twinkling with affection. "Well, I suppose I should be more considerate of my lady's well-being," he said, his tone teasing yet tender. He walked over to the bed and gently pulled a blanket over Jane's exposed form. "There, now you are safe from any further assaults." Jane's laughter softened into a contented sigh as she snuggled into the blanket. "You are too kind, my lord," she murmured, her eyes closing as she drifted into a peaceful slumber. Robb watched her for a moment, his heart swelling with love and protectiveness. He then turned and walked to the window, looking out over the darkened landscape of River Run. The weight of his responsibilities pressed heavily on his shoulders, but the sight of Jane's peaceful face gave him a momentary reprieve. He knew that the coming days would be filled with challenges and battles, but for now, he allowed himself a brief moment of peace. He took a deep breath, savoring the quiet of the night before turning back to the room and extinguishing the candle. As the room plunged into darkness, Robb climbed back into bed, wrapping his arms around Jane. He held her close, drawing strength from her presence, and allowed himself to drift into a restless sleep, his mind already planning the next steps in their fight for the North. In the valley, Greene's preparations continued with meticulous care. The stability and recovery of the region were paramount, and he knew that every decision he made would have far-reaching consequences. The Kleb soldiers stationed there were essential to maintaining order, and he had no intention of mobilizing them unnecessarily. Greene's plan to bring only 100 Valley cavalry and Kleb soldiers to the Bloodgate was a calculated move. He understood the unique nature of the Crabclaw Peninsula, where every citizen was a capable warrior. The challenge, however, was ensuring there was enough food to sustain them. Maester Erlin, who had joined the Grimm group, had spent much of his time writing letters and sending messages. His knowledge of the Crabclaw Peninsula was limited to what he had read in books, and Greene's words piqued his curiosity. Just as he was about to inquire further, Baron Greven interrupted. "Lord Greene," Baron Greven said, bowing slightly, "my eldest son, second son, and youngest son are at your disposal. I request to fight for you on their behalf. This is the highest honor of the Heshe family." Greene's brown eyes seemed to pierce through to the core of Baron Greven's intentions. "Swords and guns on the battlefield have no eyes. Lean, your eldest son, is very reliable. Let him stay in the valley." Baron Greven was visibly moved and saluted again. "Thank you for your kindness, my lord." Turning to Maester Erlin, Greene said, "In a few days, Maester Al from Whispering Castle will arrive at Eagle's Nest City. You can learn more about the Crabclaw Peninsula territory from him." Greene stood up, prompting Baron Greven and Maester Erlin to do the same. He walked slowly to Maester Erlin and said, "Kleb's ruling area is expanding. As a ruler, I need more Knights of the Mind composed of bachelors. Your wealth of knowledge must always be available to me." After a brief pause, he continued, "Maester Al will be the first Maester, and you will be appointed as my second Maester." Maester Erlin was visibly excited. He bowed deeply. "Thank you for your trust, Lord Greene. This is the honor of my life." As Baron Greven weighed the pros and cons in his mind, Greene waved him over. "Loyal Greven, come." The three of them stood together in front of a long table covered with a map of the Riverlands. Greene pointed to the location of Maidenpool. "My people are ready nearby," he said, slowly outlining his next plan. Westeros lacked a specific concept of counterintelligence, and Greene's differential treatment of those he trusted was evident. His love for his subordinates was often full of patience and initiative, and his requirements were simple: do not let down his good intentions. After discussing the plan, Greene listened to Baron Greven's sincere advice. His goal was clear: the western neighbor of Crabclaw Peninsula, Crow Roost Castle. In the Riverlands, at River Run, Robb Stark groaned as he awoke. The room was dimly lit by flickering candlelight. He took a deep breath and climbed off the large wooden bed, reaching for his black robe. As he dressed, his blue eyes moved towards Jane Westerling, who lay on the bed. "My Jenny," he said with a smile, "if you don't cover yourself, you might find yourself under attack from Stark again." Jane's sweet, seductive laughter filled the room. She lay on her side, supporting her flushed face with one hand, her moist, beautiful eyes slowly taking in Robb from top to bottom. "Poor Miss Westerling," she said, her voice slightly hoarse. "She has been attacked by the king in the north so many times that she has lost count." Robb chuckled, his eyes twinkling with affection. "Well, I suppose I should be more considerate of my lady's well-being," he teased, gently pulling a blanket over Jane's exposed form. "There, now you are safe from any further assaults." Jane's laughter softened into a contented sigh as she snuggled into the blanket. "You are too kind, my lord," she murmured, her eyes closing as she drifted into a peaceful slumber. Robb watched her for a moment, his heart swelling with love and protectiveness. He then turned and walked to the window, looking out over the darkened landscape of River Run. The weight of his responsibilities pressed heavily on his shoulders, but the sight of Jane's peaceful face gave him a momentary reprieve. He knew that the coming days would be filled with challenges and battles, but for now, he allowed himself a brief moment of peace. He took a deep breath, savoring the quiet of the night, before turning back to the room and extinguishing the candle. As the room plunged into darkness, Robb climbed back into bed, wrapping his arms around Jane. He held her close, drawing strength from her presence, and allowed himself to drift into a restless sleep, his mind already planning the next steps in their fight for the North. "Westerling, I don't believe she will be attacked by a Stark knight for the 4th time today." Robb grinned. "You will regret it. I plan to change positions this time unless you beg for mercy." Jane's eyes were fixed on Robb's waist as she said hoarsely, "The brave Westerling women never beg for mercy." Robb picked up the leather wine bag, stared at the fearless Jane, and took a swig of the northern spirit. Just as he was about to move, there was a rapid knock on the door. Immediately afterward, the voice of Leonard Westerling, Jane's brother, sounded urgently. "Your Majesty, Lord Karstark has killed Martin Lannister, Sir Kevin's 3rd son, who is now your prisoner." Chapter 282. The Heavy Crown. Robb Stark's eyes suddenly sharpened. He straightened his loose robes and said in a deep voice, "Come in." The door was pushed open, and Sir Leonard Westerling strode in. He glanced at his sister, who had just pulled the blanket up to her thighs, and saluted Robb, "Your Majesty." Robb nodded slightly and called, "Loram, bring me my clothes." A childish boy's voice sounded from outside the door. "As you command, Your Majesty." Not long after, Loram Westerling trotted in with clothes in his arms. He was Jenny's younger brother, 9 years old, and had recently been appointed as the king's attendant. Robb put on his leather coat, his anger no longer visible, and said, "Tell me everything you know, Sir Leonard." Seeing his brother behind the king, standing on tiptoes adjusting his collar, Sir Leonard walked over to help. He said, "Rickard Karstark and his men suddenly broke into the cell where the prisoners were held, and Martin Lannister was killed on the spot. After receiving the news, Lord Umber Greatjon apprehended him." Robb said solemnly, "Did Rickard and Greatjon have a conflict?" Just as Sir Leonard was about to speak, he saw his sister, who had put on her long skirt, approaching. He stopped to help her, then stood in front of Robb again and respectfully replied, "Before Lord Umber arrived, 2 guards in the cell were killed. Later, I heard that several of their men were injured." After putting on his coat, Loram trotted over and picked up the black boots. Robb sat down and said, "Sir Leonard, summon all my vassals. I will hold court in the main castle hall." After a pause, he said coldly, "Rickard Karstark." "As you command, Your Majesty." Sir Leonard bowed and strode out of the room. Loram lifted one of Robb's legs and struggled to put on his boots, his forehead beaded with sweat. Jenny lowered herself to help, but was gently pushed away by her younger brother. He whispered, "I can do it. I'm going to get the crown." Jenny reached out and ruffled her stubborn brother's hair, then stood up and walked to another part of the room. In Riverrun, outside the door of the Duke's chambers, Brynden Tully's voice was filled with anger. "Edmure, you should report this to King Robb first." A guilty look flashed across Edmure Tully's face, and he explained, "I need my father's permission before my marriage." Seeing his uncle's darkened face, he whispered again, "After all, I am Robb's uncle. It is not proper for me to discuss my marriage with my nephew." Sir Brynden said coldly, "My nephew, Robb, is your king. Don't forget that you have promised King Robb to marry the Frey Lady." Regarding his uncle's accusation, Edmure looked unperturbed. He had already thought of a perfect solution. His tone seemed to be asking for credit. "Uncle, if I marry Cersei Lannister, peace will be ushered in immediately. Without war, does Robb still need to be afraid of the small Frey family? Do I still need to marry an ugly old Frey woman?" He murmured to himself. "The Freys all look like weasels." Sir Brynden stared at his complaining nephew for a while, frowned, and corrected. "Edmure, remember, King Robb is never afraid. He had to choose to appease Lord Frey for the sake of our kingdom." Edmure soon realized that he had said the wrong thing, and he promised, "Uncle, it was just a slip of the tongue. You know, I have always been proud of my sister for giving birth to Robb. We are a family." He showed a proud look. "Besides, my idea can help Robb. I'm very happy, really." Brynden's elder brother, Hoster Tully, was the restless Duke of Riverrun, always traveling around the 7 kingdoms, So Brynden had taken on many of his father's responsibilities on his brother's behalf, and therefore knew Edmure very well. He was sure that Edmure was first attracted by Cersei's beauty, and the rest came to him later. But he was also sure that if this matter was not good for the Tully and Stark families, Edmure would never stick to his idea. Family, responsibility, honor. For the Tully family, family comes first. Brynden sighed inwardly. He had to admit that the proposal had a certain allure for the devastated Riverlands. Not long after, he snapped out of the sweet dream he had unconsciously fallen into. He stared at his nephew and asked, "Edmure, is this an idea given to you by the Lannisters?" Edmure nodded, showing no intention of hiding it. "Uncle, it was indeed Tyrion Lannister who suggested it." He glanced around, then leaned closer to Sir Brynden and lowered his voice. "Lannister promised me that if the marriage succeeds, Robb will still be the king in the north. And," he looked around again and whispered, "Lannister even promised to let House Tully wear the crown of King of the Trident." Sir Bryndon's pupils shrank suddenly. Edmure continued, "This is Lannister's conspiracy to drive a wedge between the Tullys and the Starks. I saw through it long ago." He curled his lips and added, "Robb is my nephew. How could I betray my family? The Lannisters want to provoke us." Sir Brynden reminded him directly, "Edmure, the Lannisters cannot be trusted. You should not believe their words." Edmure's blue eyes were as clear as lake water. He said in surprise, "A conspiracy is a conspiracy, but how could the Lannister family lie about Cersei Lannister's marriage, uncle? Moreover, Lord Tywin's eldest son is in our hands. The Lannisters would never dare to break their promise." Sir Bryndon's eyes were deep. "What if the condition of the marriage is that the Lannister envoy takes away the Kingslayer first? Can you still trust the Lannisters as you do now?" Edmure looked at Sir Brynden for a while and said, "We can sign the agreement first, under the witness of the gods." Sir Brynden sighed. "My son, if what you say were effective, the Targaryens would not have lost their Iron Throne. Think about the war 16 years ago." Edmure couldn't grasp Sir Bryndon's hint. Wasn't that war because of the wrongful actions of Prince Rhaegar? Didn't he first violate his honor and insult the Starks and Baratheons? And didn't Aerys II, the Mad King, kill Ned's father and brother? The Tullys and the Starks were justified. Sir Brynden stared at his nephew, who couldn't grasp the point, and said, "Edmure, my dear nephew, please recall what the Lannisters did at that time and how they did it." After a pause, he added, "I have not forgotten why we raised an army to conquer the Targaryens." There was a hint of anger in his voice. "This is a Lannister we're talking about." Edmure's eyes were still full of doubts. Sir Brynden took a deep breath and then said slowly, "Duke Tywin entered the throne room of Aerys II under the guise of loyalty and protecting the Iron Throne of Targaryen. Do you want me to tell you in detail what he did after entering the city?" Edmure thought his uncle was talking about the legal issues of the Iron Throne. He scratched his head like he did when he was a child, smiled sheepishly, and said, "I understand. Thank you, uncle. I will be vigilant. I won't easily trust a Lannister's promise." "Not just the Lannisters." Sir Brynden reached out and patted his nephew on the arm. "What I really want to tell you is, this is war. In times of war, anyone may do whatever it takes to defeat their opponent. In a chaotic situation, many people will choose winning over honor." Edmure nodded solemnly. After a pause, Sir Brynden said again, "Edmure, come with me to see the king. This kind of thing should be done with his permission in advance. You have to ask the king for forgiveness." The two began to walk. Edmure shrugged and said, "I will. I would ask for forgiveness." Sir Bryndon's face was weathered, and the years had stolen his reddish-brown hair, leaving only a head of gray. As he walked, he said uneasily, "Edmure, my son, although Robb is your nephew, you must remember that he is your king first." Edmure promised, "I know. I will definitely support him." Sir Brynden nodded and spoke again. "A king is different from a lord. Robb has put. At a young age, he bore the weight of a heavy crown. Now he is easily offended by anything that undermines the king's authority. As someone close to him, uncle, I hope you will not only support him, but also understand his struggles." As soon as the uncle and nephew stepped out of the gate, the sound of rapid horse hooves filled the air. Following the noise, they saw Sir Leonard approaching on horseback. Upon reaching them, Sir Leonard dismounted and saluted. Lord Brynden, Lord Edmure, His Majesty wishes to judge the prisoner, Rickard Karstark. He has ordered everyone to gather in the main castle hall. Sir Brynden frowned, paused, and then replied, "Thank you, Sir Leonard. We will be there shortly." Edmure watched Sir Leonard's departing figure with an unusually serious expression. Noticing this, Sir Brynden asked, "What's the matter, Edmure?" Edmure hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Uncle, let me assure you that I am not envious of the Westerling siblings." Seeing Sir Brynden nod, he continued, "You see, Jane Westerling is Robb's future queen, Leonard Westerling is Robb's guard captain, and Loram Vis Sterling is Robb's personal squire." He spread his hands in a gesture of frustration. "Westerling, Westerling, it feels like Robb is being surrounded by the Westerling family. I don't know why, but this makes me uneasy." He shrugged. "I can't quite explain this feeling." Sir Brynden seemed pleased. "I'm glad you are thinking about this, Edmure." He paused in front of the horse, reaching out to stroke its neck. "Our young king needs time to grow. He must learn how to be a good king on his own. During this period, the Tully family will be his most reliable guardians." Chapter 283, The Heavy Crown, Part 2. In the Grand Hall of Riverrun, massive marble columns supported the lofty ceiling, and the surrounding walls were adorned with opulent tapestries depicting history, legends, and family crests. On the high platform of the hall, the King of the North and the Trident, Robb Stark, sat on an oak chair intricately carved with patterns and a high back. The bronze and black iron sword crown on Robb's head emitted a dim light under the torches, casting shadows that obscured his eyes. Guards in gray robes carried Martin Lannister's body on their shoulders and laid it below the dais. A sudden silence fell over the hall, the candlelight flickering. Traces of a struggle were evident on the corpse. The arms were covered with sword wounds from blocking attacks, and red liquid still oozed slowly from the chest and lower abdomen wounds, resembling toothless mouths drooling. Edmure Tully stood to the right of the king, one hand resting on the back of his father's throne. He glanced back from the high platform at Brynden Tully beside him. His uncle, aware of the situation, gave a slight nod. Below the platform, Rose Bolton stood among the northern vassals, his face as impassive as an ice sculpture, seemingly indifferent to the corpse nearby. King Robb looked down, his gaze lingering on the bloody corpse for a moment before he spoke, his voice devoid of emotion. "Renard, tell Greatjon to bring them in." "As you command." Leonard Westerling turned around, his footsteps echoing in the stone hall. Shortly after, the escort Greatjon appeared, bearing a striking resemblance to the prisoner in his hands. Both were tall, with thick beards and long shoulder-length hair. More than a dozen people followed them, clad in chainmail or ringmail, boots, and thick cloaks made of wool or natural animal fur. The possession of weapons determined who was the prisoner. 2 of Greatjon's men were wounded, and 3 of the prisoners bore sword strikes. Just yesterday, or rather not long ago, they had been brothers, fighting side by side and drinking together. The North is a harsh and unforgiving place. The descendants of those who have lived there for generations show no mercy, recognizing only the lords they deem worthy. When the prisoners stood quietly, King Robb's voice came from above. "Greatjon, are there only 5 of you?" Greatjon's voice boomed like a bell. "King Robb, we killed 2 when we captured them, and 1 was seriously injured. He was dying, so we didn't bring him." King Robb's eyes moved to the prisoners below. "Are you 8 strong men going to kill an unarmed 13-year-old prisoner?" At this moment, Edmure quickly raised his voice, seeing his uncle's look. In order to enter the cell, they also murdered 2 guards of the Tully family. He glanced at his uncle, seeking approval. Sir Brynden pretended not to notice. He had asked Edmure to speak as a precaution. The ancestors of the North were not only stubborn but also reckless, and Robb was still new to the game of power. Brynden worried that his great-nephew King might be forced to make a harsh decision. As the king with the bronze and black iron sword crown, Robb had the authority to deal with criminals, but the man below was Rickard Karstark, a member of a branch of the Stark family and a vassal of Robb's father. Sir Brynden's eyes trembled. A wolf pack cannot have 2 leaders for long. Robb and his father must meet soon, or the northern vassals would eventually be divided. Every lord, regardless of size, had selfish motives that couldn't be resolved simply by familial love. Bryndon's deep eyes slowly scanned Earl Bolton and the other northern vassals. There might be those with even greater ambitions hiding among them. Something was amiss today. He suspected that the simple-minded Earl of Karstark might have been influenced by someone with a hidden agenda. Lord Edmure, that was not murder. Lord Rickard refuted the accusations made by the heir of Riverrun, his expression unchanging. He was tightly bound with ropes, his face drip, in with blood. He shouted to the king, "Even the king has no right to prevent a father from avenging his son." There was a hint of suppressed anger in King Robb's voice. "Karstark, during the battle in the Whispering Forest, I saw your sons die with my own eyes. Torrhen Karstark and Eddard Karstark did not die at the hands of Martin Lannister. How can you call this revenge?" His eyes became sharp. "This is a foolish act of yours, a bloody murder. Your 2 sons died gloriously in battle, but you insulted their honor by murdering innocent prisoners." Lord Rickard was unmoved by King Robb's accusation. "My 2 sons are dead. They died at the hands of the regicide. Blood debt can only be paid with blood. This man is of the same race as him, so his death is not a pity. Pay with a child's blood?" Robb pointed at the corpse below angrily. "Rickard, how old was he? He was only 12 or 13 years old." Earl Rickard did not back down. In response to the king's anger, he also chose to be angry. A descendant of the ancestors of the North can hunt and fight at the age of 10. He is not young anymore. Robb's fists tightened and he stared at the people below. Rickard Karstark, Martin Lannister laid down their weapons as early as in the West. From then on, they were just prisoners, disarmed, locked in a cell. God damn it, this kid was just a prisoner. Seeing that the king's anger was growing, Sir Bryndon approached quietly. Just as he was about to speak, Robb raised his hand slightly to stop him. He continued, "You murdered prisoners who had laid down their weapons. This is betrayal." Betrayal! Lord Rickard held his chin high. "The person who killed the Lannister family is a traitor? Your Majesty, have you forgotten who our enemy is? We are still at war with the Lannisters, and in war, people die." He mocked. "Lord Ned must have taught you this. Has His Majesty the King forgotten your father's teachings, boy?" "Damn you!" Great John raised his steel-armored fist and struck, knocking Count Rickard to the ground. "Don't touch him." Robb's tone was stern, stopping the Great John from continuing the attack. "Watch your mouth!" After the warning, the Great John retreated. "Bah!" Lord Rickard spat out a tooth and said, "Very well, Great John, let the king deal with me." His bloody mouth split into a grim smile. "Your Majesty, a father who loves his son will make any request to the king. If you execute the regicide, I will let you do it." Chapter 284, The Heavy Crown. After Count Rickard's words fell, the hall fell silent. Robb stared at Count Rickard below, his eyes sharp. The Great John suddenly grabbed a spear from a guard, pressed it against Earl Rickard's back, and said angrily, "King Robb, let me pierce his chest open and see what's inside." Earl Rickard laughed loudly and said, "If my heart can help my sons wake up from the grave, I am willing to dig it out." The veins on the back of his hands pulsed with intensity. Sir Brandon could clearly feel his nephew's anger growing stronger. He took a step forward and spoke downwards. "Earl Karstark died in the Riverlands at the hands of the regicide. He had many children, and their father is also filled with the fire of hatred." Lord Rickard's eyes moved to Bryndon Tully, and he grinned. "Lord Blackfish, everyone can stab him with a sword. I just want to avenge my son. I don't mind the rest." Sir Bryndon glanced at the people below and raised his voice slightly. "We are fighting for the Riverlands and the North. Anyone may die on the battlefield. Death in battle is the highest honor of a knight." He glanced sideways at King Robb, then turned his gaze back to the people below and said, "Your son died heroically in battle, but in the name of your father, you used your selfishness to tarnish your son's honor." After Sir Blackfish finished speaking, everyone below couldn't help but nod in agreement. Seeing this, Earl Rickard spat blood and said, "This is a matter for the people in the North, Lord Blackfish. You are too lenient." Bryndon stretched out his hand and pressed it down, and the lords of the Riverlands below who were about to speak fell silent. He said, "Earl Karstark, please take back your inappropriate words. You and I, and everyone present, are vassals of King Robb." Edmure Tully looked at his uncle with admiration. He took a step forward and said loudly, "Rickard Karstark, we both serve under the banner of King Robb, but you serve your own selfish motives, and the guard who killed my father. If it is according to your statement, how should this account be settled?" Earl Rickard was speechless, but still said angrily, "The ancestors only believed in their own knives and swords, not their ears and tongues." "You!" Edmure pointed angrily at the stubborn scoundrel. Sir Brynden first raised his hand to stop Edmure's movement and said, "Lord Karstark, please answer me. When your sword pierced the Tully Guard, did you ever think that we had been fighting side by side under King Robb's banner?" He turned slightly sideways, stretched out one hand towards Robb's position, and said, "The trout can also speak with the sword in his hand, but the wolf banner is flying above our heads. Edmure and I have no right to deal with the king's vassal." Earl Rickard seemed to be roaring, "Come on, take my head. Let me see your craftsmanship." Sir Brendan's voice was hoarse, and his eyes were deep. "If the king allows it, I will." Black Walder had been standing behind, as if watching a show. He suddenly pushed away the person in front of him roughly, walked out, and said loudly, "Lord Blackfish, my warhammer is willing to serve you and help you smash this northerner's head." Sir Brynden looked at Black Walder, who was eager to try. He narrowed his eyes slightly and said, "Little Frey, although I am a bit old, I can still wield the sword like a young man." Hearing Sir Brendan's hidden warning, Black Walder grinned, showing his yellow teeth, but said no more. He was then pulled back into the crowd by other Freys. Just as Robb was about to speak, Rose Bolton stroked his chest and said, "Your Majesty the King, please allow me." He moved his steps, stood beside Earl Rickard, and continued, "Take Rickard Karstark to Winterfell, and Lord Eddard will deal with him personally." Robb's eyes seemed to be burning with anger, and Lord Rickard laughed loudly and said, "If Lord Ned wants to chop off my head with ice, I have nothing to say, and I don't need any reason. That is the honor of the North. The people with Fai, harness, and protect the realm. But now, it seems that no matter what I do, I am surrounded by betrayal and treachery." The room remained silent, the weight of Robb's words hanging heavily in the air. Sir Brynden, known as the Blackfish, stepped forward, his voice steady and reassuring. "Your Majesty, the path of a king is never easy. You are young, but you have shown great wisdom and strength. Do not let the actions of a few dishonorable men make you doubt yourself." Robb's uncle nodded in agreement. "Robb, you have the support of your family and your loyal bannermen. We will stand by you through these dark times. Together, we can overcome these challenges." Robb looked at his uncle and great-uncle, their faces filled with concern and determination. He felt a surge of gratitude and resolve. "Thank you, both of you. Your support means more to me than you know. We will face these trials together, and we will prevail." As the storm raged outside, the three men sat in the dimly lit room, discussing their next steps. They knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but they were determined to protect their people and their kingdom. Meanwhile, in the Great Hall, the tension was palpable. The lords and knights whispered among themselves, their eyes darting towards the door where Robb had exited. The royal steward, still trying to maintain order, called for silence once more. "Everyone, please remain calm. King Robb will return shortly with his decision." The hall gradually quieted down, but the atmosphere remained charged with anticipation. The lords knew that the fate of Rickard Karstark and his men would set a precedent for how Robb would handle dissent and betrayal within his ranks. Outside, the storm continued to rage, the thunder and lightning a fitting backdrop for the turmoil within the castle. The Great John and his men stood guard over the prisoners, their expressions grim. They knew that the executions would be a harsh but necessary message to anyone who dared to defy the king. As the night wore on, the storm began to subside, and the castle slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. The lords and knights retired to their chambers, their minds heavy with the events of the day. In the quiet of his room, Robb Stark lay awake, his thoughts racing. He knew that the decisions he made in the coming days would shape the future of his kingdom. He vowed to himself that he would be the king his people needed, a king who would lead them through the darkness and into the light. With that resolve, he finally closed his eyes, ready to face whatever challenges the dawn would bring. All vassals fairly, and fight against enemies bravely. He sighed softly. Even now, I can't figure out why everything is so chaotic. Who can tell me what happened? Rickard and I fought side by side through life and death. His 2 sons were more protective. I died heroically in the Whispering Forest, and Martin Lannister was my enemy. For him, I had to deal with the father of my deceased friend. He looked at Sir Brynden. Will the Lannister family thank me, or will the Fry family thank me? Sir Brynden shook his head bluntly. No. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. After receiving a response, Sir Reynold pushed open the door and entered, raindrops dripping down his cloak and helmet. There was panic in his voice. Your Majesty, all the Karstark soldiers have escaped. Tell me clearly, what do you mean by running away? Robb's voice was thick and unclear. Sir Reynold raised his hand to wipe the rain off his face casually and replied, They left in groups at a very fast speed. It is said that only the wounded are left in the Karstark camp. Robb's eyes were very sharp. Have the Karstark soldiers regrouped? Edmure stood up and said, Robb, I'm going to gather the army. Edmure, come back, Sir Brynden scolded. You will trigger a battle between the army of the North and the army of the Riverlands. Sit down. Edmure opened his mouth but sat down obediently. Robb rubbed his temples and said, Hal, Ion, the eldest son of Lord Rickard. They are going to join him. The army led by Bolton is stationed north of the Twins, the Stark shieldmen. They're out there. He rubbed his temples again and continued, More than 300 cavalrymen and 600 warhorses. We lost the cavalrymen of Karstark. Edmure reminded Robb, The news must be blocked otherwise. Sir Brynden interrupted, The news has already been brought out by the Karstark family, Strand. We are already 1 step too late. I will reveal the truth, Robb stared at the Dark Crown and continued. Rickard Karstark provoked me and betrayed me. I had no choice but to sentence him to death. Realism. Chapter 285, The Heavy Crown. Hearing Robb's decision, Edmure couldn't help but widen his eyes. He opened his mouth and said, Do you have to kill him? Can you spare his life? Robb's sharp eyes moved, and he hesitated. Robb, Your Majesty, I hate him as much as you do. He killed my people. The guards in the cell are all my father's veterans, but they suffered this bad fate. His Adam's apple rolled, and he continued, We must punish Lord Karstark, that's for sure. Perhaps lock him up. Helion, yes, Harrion Karstark. He seemed to have finally found a reasonable reason. We can take Count Karstark as a hostage and tell him that as long as he promises to be loyal to you, we will spare his father's life. He spread his hands. Old Frey's matter has not been resolved yet. If we lose the cavalry and infantry of the Karstark family, what hope do we have in the war with the Lannisters? The atmosphere in the room was tense. Edmure swallowed nervously, and King Robb murmured, I hope. Breathing heavily, Robb continued, Marquis Frey still hasn't replied. The Vale fell into the hands of the Lannisters. Damn it! How could the Knights of the Vale, who were famous in the Seven Kingdoms, be defeated so quickly? That's tens of thousands of heavy cavalry. 10,000! No, 3,000 is enough. If 3,000 Vale heavy cavalry join us, I can immediately change the war situation. With a splash, Sir Brynden poured a glass of wine and placed it in front of Robb. He was always kind to his grandnephew King, but now his tone was stern. As a king, you cannot complain about the arrangements of the gods. This is the test of the gods for the new king. Robb was slightly startled. He raised his glass and took a big sip of wine. He paused and said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be like this. He took a breath and continued, The Lannisters have just experienced a great war, and they will not be able to advance in a short period of time. I will take advantage of this to solve the problem at hand. He glanced at the 2 relatives in front of him and said, Uncle, Grandpa, I plan to take this opportunity to reorganize the troops and prepare for the decisive battle in the future. Sir Brynden's expression was kind. He nodded and said, I will support you, my king. Edmure first looked at his uncle, then at Robb for a while, and said, King Robb, maybe we can end this war without fighting. Robb looked at Edmure with cold eyes, and he quickly said, Marriage. The Lannister envoy proposed to me that I marry Cersei Lannister. After speaking, he remembered his uncle's advice and added, The Karstark incident happened so suddenly that I didn't have time to tell you about it. Robb stared at Edmure, whose eyes were a little evasive for a while, and said, "Uncle, please continue." Edmure was secretly relieved, and he told Tyrion's proposal in detail. After listening, Robb frowned and thought for a moment. He looked at Sir Brynden and said, "Uncle, I don't trust the Lannisters. Could this be their conspiracy to rescue Tywin's eldest son?" Sir Brynden nodded slightly and said, "There is a possibility that we need to always be wary of the Lannisters' cunning. If this is the Lannisters' conspiracy, you can also use their conspiracy to buy us more time for preparation." Recalling the beauty of Cersei described by Tyrion, Edmure's mind was spinning rapidly. He suggested, "King Robb, we must first let Duke Tywin send Cersei Lannister to Riverrun before we can release his son." Edmure's face turned red when Sir Brynden saw him. He pretended to be confused and said, "What's wrong? Is my idea bad?" Sir Brynden looked away and said nothing. Robb gave Edmure a rare smile and said, "Your idea is a good one, Uncle." Edmure was flattered by Robb's compliment. He couldn't help but laugh. Sir Brynden finally resisted the urge to hold his forehead. Two things. Robb raised the crown made of steel and bronze with both hands, put it on his head, and said, "The first thing is that Rickard Karstark must die." Edmure was so surprised that he blurted out, "Wouldn't it be better not to kill him?" Robb adjusted his heavy crown and replied, "Uncle, I have my own responsibilities. When the war breaks out, I will kill Martin Lannister with my own hands, but this is not a battlefield. He is unarmed and is my prisoner, under my protection." Rickard Karstark murdered more than just Martin Lannister. He murdered my honor. Tomorrow morning, I will put him to death. Sir Brynden was silent for a moment, then nodded and asked, "What's the second thing?" "In 10 days, Robb announced, I will be married to Jane Westerling." Sir Brynden frowned slightly. "King Robb, what about Marquis Frey's reply?" King Robb shook his head. "Uncle, we don't have much time. We must let the Frey family make a choice as soon as possible. Before the war comes, I must figure out who my enemy is. I would rather lead 10,000 loyal soldiers than 30,000 with divided loyalties." Edmure, still confused about the sudden mention of war, was brought back to the moment when Robb addressed him. "Uncle, I would like to ask for your help with the wedding arrangements." Edmure, pleased that his nephew trusted him, responded, "Don't worry. Leave everything to me. I will arrange everything perfectly." The next morning, the storm that had raged all night had passed. The sky was gray, and the air was freezing. The 7 prisoners of Karstark had been hung on the high wall of Riverrun, their bodies swinging in the wind on long ropes. The Godswood in Riverrun was crowded with people. Lords of the Riverlands in the north, nobles and servants, knights, mercenaries, blacksmiths, merchants, and camp maidens all stood in the forest to witness the execution. The soldiers of Greatjon escorted the bound Lord Rickard to the execution platform under the Heart Tree. King Robb took the executioner's long-handled axe, stood beside Earl Rickard, and declared, "Rickard Karstark, it was I who sentenced you to death. According to the tradition of the North, I will do it myself." Rickard, wearing a dark woolen coat with the sunburst emblem of the Karstark family embroidered on it, raised his head stiffly and said, "For this, I thank you. For the rest, I hate you." He looked directly at Robb. "Boy, remember that the blood of the Running Wolf flows in both our veins. I, Rickard, was named in memory of your grandfather. I fought alongside your father against King Aerys, and I fought for you against King Joffrey. In the Westerlands, in the Riverlands, I stood by your side. On the banks of the Trident, I fought to the end with your father. Stark and Karstark, we are inseparable." 1,000 years ago, Caron Stark, the youngest son of Winterfell, led an army to quell a rebellion and was granted a fief for his bravery. He named his castle the City of Caron, which over time became the City of Cahor. The Starks of Cahor were also called the Karstarks. King Robb said coldly, "You are my relative, but you still betrayed me. Blood cannot save you. Kneel down, Rickard Karstark." Rickard spat, "Both the old and new gods will forever curse the kinslayer." King Robb repeated in a cold voice, "Do you want me to have you put on the scaffold? Kneel down, traitor." Count Rickard knelt and placed his head on the execution platform. "You judge me, and the gods will judge you. Rickard Karstark, Lord of Cahor, in the presence of gods and men, I, Robb Stark, Lord of the North and the Trident, sentence you to death for the crimes of murder and rebellion, and I will execute it myself." Following the tradition of his ancestors, King Robb asked, "Do you have any last words?" Count Rickard's voice was full of hatred. "Kill me quickly and accept the curse. You are no longer my king, boy." The axe rose and fell, heavy and precise. Blood splattered everywhere, and Earl Rickard's head was severed from his body. Heavy rain began to pour suddenly, pattering against the ground. In the distance, Tyrion wiped the rain off his face and remarked, "A very fair young man, but such a person is not suited for the forward Game of Thrones." The rain grew heavier, and Bronn couldn't hear clearly. "Sir, what did you say?" he asked. Tyrion quickened his pace, his short legs moving faster. "I said Lord Tywin will love this young man to death," he replied casually. Bronn, still unable to hear clearly, decided not to press further and quickened his pace to keep up. Inside the hotel, Tyrion tossed a towel to his young squire. He took a wineglass to the window and sipped the wine. Bronn, combing his hair with his fingers, leaned against the window and said, "Sir, you seem to be in a bad mood." Tyrion gazed at the pouring rain outside the window, took another sip of wine, and said, "A bad world needs just people, but truly just people often cannot win the game of power." Bronn scratched his cheek with his index finger. "My lord, to earn my reward, I really want to flatter you, but to be honest, this mercenary doesn't quite understand what you mean," he said. He pinched his chin and continued, "Are you feeling sorry for that Stark king, or do you think there's something wrong with his handling?" Tyrion looked at Bronn sideways. "Mercenary, has anyone told you that you're a little too smart?" he asked. Bronn shrugged. "As a mercenary, I don't need to understand my employer's words, but I must understand his preferences. This affects how much reward I can get," he said. Tyrion tilted his head. "What a disturbing answer," he remarked. Bronn stared at the money bag hanging from Tyrion's waist and grinned. "Noble lord, I will always be yours," he said. The Lannister lion took off his purse and threw it to Bronn. "Lisa again?" he asked. Bronn bowed. "It's Lisa," he confirmed, showing a lewd smile. "She makes me feel the value of the golden dragon." He bowed gracefully again. "Thank you for the reward. Her craftsmanship is excellent." Tyrion pinched his chin, suspicious. "It seems she likes golden dragons very much. Why didn't I know?" he wondered. Bronn's smile grew even more lewd. "Perhaps she knows you can give her more," he suggested. Tyrion suddenly laughed. "I want to warn you, don't ask her about my size, Bronn," he said, grinning. "I'm worried you'll be depressed from now on." While they were still joking, Robb's captain of the guard, Leonard Westerling, emerged from the rain. "Lannister envoy, the King of the North and the Trident will summon you in the main castle hall tomorrow morning," he announced. Tyrion looked at the heir to the Earl of Lower West and Crag City and smiled. "It's a great honor. Please thank King Stark on my behalf," he said. Sir Leonard lowered his high chin, turned around, and started walking. As he reached the door, Tyrion suddenly stopped him. Sir Leonard turned back, and Tyrion's voice was filled with curiosity. "Sir, did the Westerling family decide to move to the snowy Winterfell because it was too hot in the west?" he asked. Sir Leonard blushed. "9 days later, my sister will hold a grand wedding with King Robb. Westerling is the Queen's family, Lannister," he said with a cold snort before opening the door and leaving. Tyrion looked at Bronn standing aside, spread his hands, and said, "It's really easy to find out a secret here." Bronn grinned. "It will soon be no secret, my lord," he said. Tyrion sighed. "My kind father is really lucky. The 7 gods are too partial," he said. Leaning back in his chair, he took another sip of wine. "I'm actually very curious as to why King Stark doesn't let his relatives wear black clothes. Is it true that the 7 gods are protecting the old lion?" He paused, then continued, "I don't want to think about it anymore. Maybe I can know the answer after meeting King Stark." With that, Tyrion walked towards a room, his small hands clasped behind his back. Chapter 286, The Obedient Lioness. 3 days later, in the Mecta Hall of the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister, slightly drunk, leaned on the armrest of her chair. She wore a burgundy off-the-shoulder dress that accentuated her alluring figure. Her green eyes flickered as she watched Osney Kettleblack enter the room. Her cheeks were flushed like a summer sunset, and her lips curved slightly as she spoke. "Osney, you're here. Come closer." Queen Cersei looked particularly beautiful in the afterglow of dusk. Hearing her voice, Osney's footsteps faltered slightly, and the 19-year-old young man felt his ears turn red. Osney was tall, with black hair and a hooked nose. He was clean-shaven, and his face showed a hint of shyness at the moment. As he stood still, ready to report the information he had just learned, Queen Cersei called softly, "Come here, closer." Looking up at Queen Cersei, who was staring at him, Osney took a step forward. Queen Cersei frowned slightly and said, "Come closer to me, Sir Osney Kettleblack." After the Battle of the Blackwater, although Osney and his brother Osfrid did not participate in the actual battle, both were knighted under Queen Cersei's orders. Osney's footsteps moved again, and Queen Cersei said impatiently, "Come closer to me and kneel in front of me." Osney almost knelt against Cersei's skirt. His eyes couldn't help but sweep over her belly. After a pause, he quickly lowered his gaze respectfully. His ears turned even redder, and his voice trembled slightly. "Your Majesty, I have something important to tell you." Cersei's white, tender fingers slowly traced Osney's face and hair, making him forget what he was going to say. After lingering for a while, she stretched out a finger, slightly raised Osney's chin, and said, "I heard that among the Kettleblack brothers." She raised her lips. "Are you the most popular?" Osney replied blankly, "Maybe. Because Osfrid always has a stern face?" Moving her finger down, her fingertips slowly drew circles on Osney's chest. Queen Cersei smiled and said, "You are really cute." Queen Cersei's voice was so seductive that Osney's body trembled slightly. A certain desire flashed in his eyes. He mustered up the courage to look up at the most noble woman in the Seven Kingdoms. At this moment, Queen Cersei leaned back gently on the chair and said coldly, "Back off, sir. Don't get too close to me." Osney was startled, and his mood suddenly became very depressed, as if he had lost something very important. He stood up obediently and took a few steps back. As he stood, he was still thinking hard about what mistake he had just made that caused Queen Cersei's attitude towards him to change so drastically. Queen Cersei shook the gem-inlaid wineglass in her hand. She looked at Osney, who was silent, and the corners of her mouth curved slightly. "A man can only think with the soft worm between his legs. As long as I control it, he is at my disposal." "Sir Osney," Cersei's voice came, and it was so beautiful that Osney couldn't help but smile in a flattering and joyful way. He quickly looked at Queen Cersei, and within his sight, her hand gently traced her curvaceous collarbone. Osney's Adam's apple moved up and down unconsciously, and Queen Cersei's voice sounded again. "What do you want to report to me, Sergeant?" "Yes, I still have something important to do." Osney swallowed secretly. He calmed down and said, "Your Majesty, I have received news. There are no secrets in the Red Keep for those who care." Osney told Queen Cersei that Tyrion had proposed to Lord Tywin that she marry Edmure Tully, the heir of Riverrun. With a bang, the exquisite golden wineglass was thrown onto the stone floor by Queen Cersei. She suppressed her anger. Osney looked worried as he replied, "Sorry, Your Majesty, I haven't yet discovered Duke Tywin's opinion on this matter." Cersei paced back and forth, her frustration evident. "You treat me like an object again? How dare! How dare!" She suddenly stopped, her anger boiling over. "I want to see the old lion." Wit, hash-a-bang, the door to the study room in the Prime Minister's tower was pushed open, and Queen Cersei walked in with her chin held high. Tywin Lannister, who was writing a letter, glanced calmly at Cersei. The quill in his hand continued to move. The old lion's mere glance transformed the previously aggressive lioness into a subdued one. She forced a smile, gave a gentle salute, and said, "Good night, Father." She grabbed the back of the chair on the other side of the table with one hand, searching for something to say. "You haven't rested yet? Are there a lot of government affairs? Are you hungry? Do you want someone to prepare something to eat, or some?" Lord Tywin, still holding the quill, did not raise his head. "Please sit down." "Thank you." Cersei sat down gently, her manners more elegant than the ladies of the Tully family. She straightened her back and sat quietly, waiting. The only sound was the pen scratching on the paper. After a pause, she couldn't help but cough slightly, hinting to Lord Tywin that she had something to say. Swish, swish, swish. Duke Tywin seemed not to hear his well-behaved daughter. He still did not raise his head. After a while, Cersei coughed again, this time slightly louder. The quill in Lord Tywin's hand paused for a moment, then continued writing. "Please speak." Cersei pursed her lips and smiled. She looked at the old lion and said, "Father, I think, among your children, I am your most outstanding descendant." She raised her chin slightly. "I can make greater contributions to the Lannister family in the Red Keep." Lord Tywin finished writing and put down his pen. He leaned back in his chair and looked at his daughter with his light green eyes flecked with gold. Facing the old lion's gaze, Cersei's fingers flexed under the table, but she maintained a ladylike smile. In Cersei's expectant eyes, Duke Tywin spread his hands and said, "Yes, please contribute." Cersei. After a long silence, Lord Tywin's patience made Cersei even more nervous. In her desperation, she thought of a suggestion. "Father, in view of our last battle with Stannis, the kingdom should strengthen Blackwater Bay as soon as possible. The more royal fleets, especially the 200-oar battleships, the better." "Very good," Duke Tywin nodded in agreement. "Then, please tell me, where is the gold to build the ships?" Cersei was slightly startled. She blinked her beautiful eyes and said, "Of course, it's the Chancellor." Duke Tywin stared at Cersei for a while. "Then where does he find the money? The kingdom's treasury, where even rats don't want to stay." "I know the status of the kingdom's treasury," Cersei reminded Duke Tywin. "Although it is not rich, didn't Robert still have a powerful royal fleet? Moreover, he could live and drink every day." There was a hint of anger in Lord Tywin's voice. "Have you ever thought that Robert was not short of money because of my continued funding?" Cersei. After a pause, she said tentatively, "Father, do you want to stop supporting Joffrey?" "This." Lord Tywin tightened his grip on the armrest and interrupted loudly. "How can I stop? How can I stop? I can only continue." He took a slow breath and continued, "But war is like a bottomless pit that swallows gold. Only by ending the war as soon as possible can we keep Lannister and your son's Iron Throne." He stared at Cersei. "This is the greatest contribution you can make." The corners of Cersei's eyes turned red. "So, is it true that you want to trade me for peace? I want to stay in King's Landing, stay with my son, and I will not marry," Cersei declared, her voice firm. Duke Tywin gritted his teeth, his expression hardening. "Cersei, I will choose a suitable candidate for you. You can still have children. You will have a new husband and bear children for him." Chapter 287, Generous Allies. Cersei's slender fingers clenched into fists, her voice resolute. "No, I won't marry." Lord Tywin's words were deliberate and unyielding. "You will marry." Cersei's anger flared. "I am the Queen Regent, not a broodmare." Lord Tywin's voice suddenly boomed, filled with suppressed fury. "You are my daughter." His eyes were cold and piercing. "You must obey my orders and marry the man I designate. I never want to hear any more vicious rumors about you." The old lion's roar made Cersei's body tremble, her blue eyes welling with tears. "Father, don't force me to marry again, please." Lord Tywin coldly interrupted her plea. "No more words." He stared at Cersei, tears brimming in her eyes, and spoke through gritted teeth. "My daughter, you have humiliated the Lannister name for too long." Cersei wiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand, her eyes flickering with defiance. "No, the Lannister lioness will never admit defeat or be manipulated by others. Not even by the old lion." She rolled her moist, clear eyes, her mind racing for a solution. Duke Tywin seemed to see through her thoughts instantly. "Cersei, I don't dislike you because you are a woman, but because you are smart and self-assertive," he said, staring at his defiant daughter. "As a Lannister and as a mother, you have allowed your son to sit on the Iron Throne and act recklessly. You are not fit to be the mother of the king. Do not bring any more trouble to the Lannister name." His voice was full of warning. "Do you think you will be the first woman dragged into a church to get married?" Cersei's chest heaved with emotion. She stopped speaking, stood up from the chair, her skirt swirling around her, and turned to leave. Though she held her chin high, she could not hide her embarrassment. Outside the room, Cersei's cold snort echoed, and not long after, Kevan Lannister walked in. Looking at Lord Tywin, who sat upright, Sir Kevan asked, "Lord Tywin, have you made your decision?" His index finger tapped the armrest of the Prime Minister's chair. Duke Tywin shook his head slightly. "Tyrell, Tully, I haven't made a choice yet. I heard that the Duke of Mace will arrive at King's Landing in 3 or 4 days. Look, he is likely here for another marriage agreement between Lannister and Tyrell," Sir Kevan said, then paused. His respectful face flashed with sharpness. Lord Tywin, why did Cersei come to you? She seemed very unhappy. I thought it was because of the marriage. Duke Tywin's voice was cold. She heard the news. There are no secrets in the Red Keep. This is a joke. He looked at Sir Kevan. I'll give you a task. Interrogate everyone in the Prime Minister's tower and execute them directly in my name. Let everyone know the consequences of revealing information. As you command, Lord Tywin. After a pause, Sir Kevan added, Cersei is Joffrey's mother after all. I can talk to her if necessary. Duke Tywin's tone remained icy. Kevan, as a Lannister, it is her responsibility and obligation to marry for the sake of the family. There is no need to say more. He snorted coldly. If you go to her, my smart daughter will think she still has room for negotiation. Sir Kevan shrugged and said nothing. Duke Tywin pointed to the chair opposite him. Let's talk about Marquis Frey. Is he still hesitant? After Sir Kevan sat down, he shook his head respectfully. Perhaps he still has some hope for Little Running Wolf. Marquis Frey has not replied to my last letter. Duke Tywin frowned, deep in thought. If Cersei's marriage partner is changed to the Tully family, the price to appease the Tyrell family will be very high. The Duke of Mace set off early, but also for my daughter. Sir Kevan nodded. Except for Cersei. There is no marriageable woman in the Lannister family who is worthy of being the heir to Highgarden, Sir Kevan said after a moment of hesitation. Lord Tywin, what concerns me more is Earl Kleb, who conquered the valley. Whether true or false, his loyalty to Cersei is known throughout the Seven Kingdoms. Miss, I fear she might use him to undermine our family's interests. With Earl Kleb's help, she could easily disrupt our plans. Therefore, we may need to appease Kleb in advance to avoid any accidents. Lord Tywin was silent for a while before responding. Go on. Let me hear your thoughts. Sir Kevan nodded slightly and said respectfully, Count Kleb's military prowess is evident to all. If we cannot use the Frey family, perhaps he would be a good match for Little Running Wolf. His eyes narrowed slightly. For this purpose, it might be worth offering Princess Myrcella. Perhaps this step could make Count Kleb truly one of our own. Lord Tywin crossed his fingers, resting his chin on them, and pondered for a moment. The offer is not enough. Myrcella is only in her early teens and does not yet possess the charm that exceeds her own value. Sir Kevan tentatively asked, Lord Tywin, are you worried about Cersei? Duke Tywin looked at Sir Kevan and said, Kevan, for Kleb, it is more beneficial to have Cersei remain as the regent queen in Magda than to have a young princess who has not even reached childbearing age. After a pause, Sir Kevan nodded slowly. As Myrcella's mother, Cersei would have sufficient reasons to reject our proposal. For example, the bloodline between Baratheon and Kleb is a significant disparity. He spread his hands. Even after conquering the valley and becoming a renowned general throughout the Seven Kingdoms, others will still see him as a nouveau riche. The ancient nobles will regard Kleb as a semi-gentleman from the swamps of the Crabclaw Peninsula, a savage noble. Sir Kevan looked at Duke Tywin. Perhaps that young lord cares more about this kind of thing than we thought, just like Marquis Frey of the twins. Myrcella's identity could help Earl Kleb compensate for this, making the offer attractive enough for him to give up on Cersei. Lord Tywin leaned back in his chair, staring at Sir Kevan for a while. Don't base another person's real needs on what you see and what you think are reasonable speculations, he warned. The closer someone is to you, the more vigilant you must be, because they may be an enemy hiding beside you. When they betray you, it is often a fatal blow. Sir Kevan listened carefully and said solemnly, I will keep it in mind, brother. Duke Tywin tapped his chin, paused, and said, Cersei can't stay in Magda. Sir Kevan asked, Lord Tywin, have you made a decision? Duke Tywin stood up and walked to the wall with the map of the Seven Kingdoms. He stared at it for a while and said, By marrying Tully and letting the Little Running Wolf continue to wear that ridiculous crown, we can put an end to this chaos immediately. He murmured, As for the Tyrell family. After a moment of silence, he continued, The Tyrell family is our only strong enemy in terms of resources, and we must continue to win them over. When the Duke of Mace arrives in King's Landing, we must propose my heir marry a Tyrell woman before he even opens his mouth. Sir Kevan nodded. Are you going to modify the content of the alliance agreement? Duke Tywin shook his head. It is to add another marriage. It is our sincerity to consolidate the alliance between Lannister and Tyrell. He turned to look at Sir Kevan. Kevan, Lannister has always been generous to its allies. We also need to choose another suitable marriage partner for the heir of Highgarden. Sir Kevan smiled. The Duke of Mace is very greedy. Lord Tywin pointed to Storm's End Castle on the map and said, I heard that when he used to promote his art of war in King's Landing, he often mentioned this place as his greatest regret. As generous allies, we should give him the opportunity to make up for that regret. As the two of them discussed the specifics of their plan, there was a knock on the door. After receiving permission to enter, a Lannister Redcloak delivered a letter brought by a messenger raven. Sir Kevan glanced at Lord Tywin before opening the letter. The seal of House Frey, depicting the bridge connecting the Twin Tower, came into view. That night, in the Queen Mother's bedroom in Maegor's Holdfast, the candlelight flickered. Queen Cersei sat at the table, furiously waving a quill in her hand. Greene Claymore, I order you to immediately. Her quill suddenly paused. Queen Cersei sat motionless for a moment, then picked up the paper in front of her and tore it to pieces. The fragments scattered on the floor as she grabbed the wineglass on the table and drank it in one gulp. After a brief pause, she pulled out a new piece of paper and picked up the quill again. My dear, I have always wanted to call you this, my Greene. 4 days later, in the Eyrie. Dear Greene, I can only call you this in secret. I want to look into your eyes and softly call you my dear. My dear, I miss your arms so much. My dear, I can't imagine being apart from you for long. My dear, at least let me have your presence in my eyes. Honey. Honey. Lord Greene put down the letter and rubbed his head. He needed Jaime Lannister. Chapter 288, Greene and the Lioness. Cersei was writing with a happy and sweet look on her face. Greene picked up Cersei's letters again. He knew her well and could even imagine Cersei's boss gritting his teeth as she wrote the letter. Rubbing the letter with his fingertips, Lord Greene was weighing the pros and cons. The next step was the Riverlands, so keeping Queen Cersei in Magta aligned more with Kleb's interests. Although Greene appeared to be reading the letter, his thoughts were racing. After Stannis was defeated, neither the Lannisters nor the Tyrells wanted Cersei to remain in Magta. Greene's brown eyes trembled slightly. Perhaps Joffrey also hoped so, as Leighton in Red had mentioned that the king was increasingly disgusted with the nagging from the Queen Mother. Greene threw Queen Cersei's letter into the brazier. The flames rose, and he stared at it as it burned. Now, Queen Cersei's situation felt like betrayal. She had to lower her always high chin, and Jaime, whom she trusted most, was still a prisoner. She could only ask him for help. James. Greene muttered as he took out a map and laid it on the table. He stared at the intersection of the River Avenue and the King's Road. His eyes slowly moved along the River Avenue towards Riverrun. Without the support of intelligence, Lord Greene could not know the specific situation of Tyrion in Riverrun. He could only speculate that the negotiations there could not be concluded in a short time. Greene's eyes narrowed slightly. Queen Cersei mentioned Highgarden and Riverrun in her letter expressing her love. She wrote, Highgarden and Riverrun are trying to prevent me from whispering in your ear. Greene couldn't help but scratch his head. Queen Cersei could easily grasp the key points of a man, but could never grasp the key points of the matter. This was very Cersei. Therefore, Duke Tywin intended to use Queen Cersei to marry into Riverrun. This was probably Tyrion's idea. If the marriage between the Lannister family and the Tully family succeeded, it would not align with Kleb's strategy. What he needed was a chaotic Riverlands. Greene missed Varys and Peter a little bit. If they were still around, forget it, just don't mention it. The essence hidden behind the scenes is to pick up leaks, and he needs to adapt to his new identity. Greene had sat at the power game table, and it was time for him to seize his own interests personally. Although she had never experienced pleasure in bed, Greene and Cersei had established a deep trust. More importantly, she was generous, which was what Lord Greene valued most. If she returned to the Red Keep at this time, Queen Cersei would eagerly use her best methods to consolidate Greene's loyalty. Now is not the past. Even if the current Lord Greene got on Cersei's ship, the price for him to get off the ship would not be high. He controlled the valley and the Crabclaw Peninsula, and he already had the strength to choose allies. Although Cersei was willful, she had to admit that she was charming. As a man, it was difficult to refuse Cersei's beauty and charm, including Greene, who had been able to persevere. In fact, he had to thank Jaime and Lancel. Because of them, it was easier for Lord Greene to remember the knowledge he had before time travel, and they were like-minded. Because they were familiar with each other, they could often extinguish Lord Greene's anger instantly. Another important point was that Lord Greene, who paid attention to details, later discovered that Cersei looked down on all the men she had been with, including Jaime Lannister, who loved her deeply. What is not available is the best and most expensive. Lord Greene would continue to control the fairness in the transaction with Queen Cersei. Her attractive body could not replace the value of the land. Among them, if Jaime were here, it would be more difficult for Greene to concentrate on the outside world. Therefore, Lord Greene also set his sights on Sir Jaime, who was a prisoner in Riverrun. Greene took out a blank piece of parchment and began to write. And picked up a quill and dipped it in ink. With a flourish, he began writing new orders. He appointed Kleb's retainer knight, Mason Baker, as the commander-in-chief of the invasion of Maiden Spring, and Dick Kleb as his adjutant. To achieve peace, Earl William Mouton of Maidenpool must swear allegiance to Crabbe with his entire family and marry his eldest daughter and heir, Elano Mouton, to Dick Crabbe. After sealing the letter with wax, Greene handed it to Brienne and instructed, "Send this to the Crow's Nest and have Maester Erlin arrange it immediately." As Brienne took the letter, he added, "Brienne, tell Erlin that if he receives a letter from Leiden, no matter the time, he must send it immediately." The cautious Lord Greene believed that if his guess was correct, Leiden in the Red Keep would soon send news that Duke Tywin would discuss marriage with Riverrun. Not long after Brienne left, Baron Greven entered the study and announced, "Lord Greene, your fiancé's entourage will rest at the inn in the eastern town tonight and arrive at the Gates of the Moon tomorrow morning." Greene paused his writing, looked up, and asked, "Are the preparations for the welcome ceremony complete?" Baron Greven, with a confident smile, placed a hand on his chest and replied, "Tomorrow morning, thousands will gather at the Gate of the Moon to welcome the future mistress of the valley." Greene smiled and said, "Thank you, loyal Greven." Turning to the Baron, who looked pleased, he added, "Tonight, we will all rest at the Gate of the Moon. Please make the necessary arrangements." Greene intended to personally welcome Daenerys at the Gates of the Moon to show his respect for his fiancée. "Go and arrange it," he instructed. Then he resumed writing, this time addressing Cersei Lannister. As the Queen Regent, her permission would make Greene's actions in the Seven Kingdoms legal. He informed her that his loyal knights would leave the Bleeding Gate and head south to the Riverlands under the pretense of conquering the rebels and the Earl of Maidenpool. To prevent the desperate Queen Cersei from suddenly destroying the Red Keep, Greene mentioned a time limit in the letter. Her guardian knights would enter King's Landing within a month. Near evening, Greene and his entourage took a specially arranged hanging basket to descend from the Eagle's Nest to the Gates of the Moon. The next morning, more than 1,000 people gathered on both sides of the road outside the East Gate of Moongate Castle. The women wore their most beautiful clothes, and many men had their children sitting on their shoulders. Flowers and ribbons adorned the scene, creating a festive atmosphere. Greene led his vassals, standing at the front, his cloak embroidered with swamp marigolds swaying slightly in the wind. One of his hands gently held the hilt of Lady Kongji's ruby sword at his waist. Amidst the excitement and anticipation, the sound of horse hooves echoed in the distance, and a gorgeous carriage gradually came into view. Behind it were dozens of cavalrymen holding high the swamp marigold flag. The carriage was decorated with elaborate patterns, and the windows were draped with tulle. As it approached, the figure inside became visible, and the corners of Greene's lips curved slightly in a smile. Chapter 289, Greene and the True Dragon. Through the curtain, Greene keenly felt the intense gaze from inside the carriage, and the corners of his mouth lifted even more. As a loyal guard, Brienne was secretly alert to the surrounding situation. She glanced at Greene, who had been smiling almost continuously since the morning. As the carriage gradually approached, her tall body straightened, and she held her chin high. Amid cheers, the carriage stopped, and a waiter lifted the footboard under the carriage door. The door opened, revealing Daenerys. She wore a blue off-shoulder dress and a crystal white pearl necklace. Her skin, as white as ivory, seemed to sparkle in the sunlight. Daenerys's delicate and beautiful face was framed by a turban, and she stood on the footboard, looking around with her violet eyes. Her smile was as warm as the summer sun. At that moment, the crowd seemed to pause, then burst into even louder cheers. Greene stepped closer and extended a hand towards Daenerys. Looking at each other, Daenerys gently held up the hem of her dress with one hand, took Greene's hand with the other, and stepped out of the carriage gracefully. The vassals of the valley came forward one by one to salute, and Daenerys returned their gestures with a gentle and dignified smile. After meeting the vassals, Daenerys received the elderly, children, and businessmen from various industries, selected by Baron Grevon in advance, to show the justice of the new ruling family. Near noon, the welcome ceremony came to an end. Daenerys used her beauty and tenderness to soothe the fear brought by the bloody Earl to the people of the valley. At this moment, the area outside the Gates of the Moon was filled with an atmosphere of happiness and hope. Before entering the castle, Daenerys turned around and waved, and then she and Greene gradually disappeared from view, leaving behind the deafening roar of the crowd. In the long corridor, Greene and Daenerys walked and talked softly, surrounded by the housekeeper Sulana, Menton, Brienne, Ainge, and others. Greene spoke seriously about the government affairs in the valley. After the harvest season, thanks to Kleb's tax exemption, the old farmers directly under our jurisdiction will come to express their gratitude on behalf of their villages. We can take this opportunity to reiterate Kleb's tax exemption order to stabilize grain prices. As he spoke, one of Greene's fingers seemed to slide across the back of Daenerys' hand inadvertently. Daenerys looked at Greene, pursed her lips, and smiled. Her tone was very much like his. Greene, I have discussed with Maester Al that after the harvest season, we can also hire the farmers to help us build a nearby granary. Daenerys' eyes lightly glanced at Greene, and one of his eyebrows raised slightly. Was she provoking him? Greene's eyes filled with fighting spirit, and Daenerys' beautiful eyes curved into crescent moons. Her smile was meaningful. She took the initiative to hold Greene's arm, letting him feel her gentleness. He thought no one would notice the small gesture, but it did not escape the attention of the three top warriors behind them. Menton whispered, "Hey!" Ainge smiled secretly, and Brienne looked at the two with an expressionless face, thinking they were not stable enough. After arriving at the study, Lord Greene asked the others to leave under the pretense of discussing government affairs. Not long after closing the door, Daenerys, whose head just reached Greene's shoulders, raised her head to speak, but he suddenly stopped her and picked her up. She couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice. Sitting on the table, Daenerys hugged Greene's neck tightly. After a moment, she held one of his hands with trembling fingers. Daenerys' cheeks flushed. "Greene, wait, let me take a bath first." Breathing briefly, she seemed to be explaining, "I sweated a lot just now." Greene lowered his head, and the warmth between them became light and gentle. When their breathing calmed down a little, they separated. Daenerys straightened her skirt and suddenly said, "Greene, go and see Rhaego and the others." She complained, "Without their father's love, they actually looked down on their mother." Greene leaned on the edge of the table, smiled, and said, "Yes, Your Highness." Daenerys couldn't help but chuckle. As she opened the door and left, she gave Greene a rare wink. Lord Greene smiled, wondering if she was deliberately adding fuel to the fire to make his fatherly love more intense. It seemed the three little dragons had offended Dany quite badly. Greene took a step forward. It was time for the three little dragons to experience the father's love as heavy as the Moon Mountains. He behaved well, and she reciprocated. This was reasonable and fair, he thought. More than half an hour later, Greene walked out of the temporary room of the three little dragons. The three brothers, Rhaegal, Viserion, and Jones, huddled in the corner lovingly and respectfully, sent their kind father away. The door closed, and after a pause, Rhaego pushed away Viserion and Jones with disgust in his flaming eyes. More than half an hour later, When Greene appeared in the dormitory after taking a bath, he learned from the maid that Daenerys was still bathing. Lying on the bed, just as Greene was about to fall asleep, Daenerys finally came in. Taking off her headscarf, her silver hair had grown to almost reach her ears. He said harshly, "Dany, I didn't beg for mercy this time. Greene, let me rest for a while, please. Greene, please. Greene, I've had enough rest." As the sun went down, Greene looked a little pale, but Daenerys looked radiant. She took him by the arm and attended the grand dinner held in her honor. The Gate of the Moon was filled with laughter, and the lively banquet lasted until late at night. Returning to the Lord's dormitory, Greene and Daenerys looked at each other for a while, and then the candlelight flickered. "Greene, please." Lord Greene snorted mercilessly. "Greene, Solana and I heard about another way." Daenerys climbed up with difficulty. She had to try unfamiliar new knowledge. Feeling that the effect was good, she raised her purple eyes and looked at him. "Greene, lie down." The next morning, after Greene had just finished giving music lessons to the three little dragons, he met Menton and Ange in the study. After hearing about their experiences in Essos, Greene looked at Menton and Ange and said, "Thank you. This contribution is no less than the other people's achievements in the valley." His eyes moved slightly, and he looked at the rotund Menton. "According to your merits, I can eliminate your illegitimate son status for you, requiring the king's order. Menton, do you know who your biological father is?" Menton shook his big head and said naively, "My mother only knew that he was a hunter. She said that he called himself the fierce old soup. My mother said that the soup he cooked was very fragrant." Greene asked, "Where does your mother live?" Menton chuckled and said, "She works as a clerk in Yewood Village, a large farm in the west of Crabclaw Peninsula, and she is literate." "Very good." Greene tapped his chin and turned to look at Ange. "You can think of your last name in advance. Based on your merits, I will personally canonize you as knights in the Church of King's Landing." The generous Lord Greene said in a gentle voice, "Go and receive your golden dragon." After Menton and Ange left, Brienne reported to Greene that Daenerys's Iron Guard, Arston the Whitebeard, Barristan Selmy, requested an audience. Greene tapped the armrest with his fingers and said, "Invite him in." Sir Barristan returned to the energetic old knight he once was. After entering the study, he took the initiative to salute with his chest. "Good day, Earl Greene." Greene returned the favor. He glanced at Sir Barristan and said, "Good day, Sir Barristan. What brings you here?" Barristan soared and said, "Congratulations, you have recovered the knight's sword, old sergeant." Sir Barristan smiled and replied, "Thank you, your highness, and thank you." Greene pointed to the chair in front of his desk and said, "Please sit down, Sir Barristan." He added, "Brienne, please pour us a glass of summer red." After Sir Barristan sat down, Greene, with a smile on his face, asked, "Dear old sir, what do you want from me?" The sound of Brienne pouring wine filled the room. Sir Barristan hesitated before saying, "Earl Greene, I request to speak with you alone." Brienne gently placed the wineglass on the table in front of them. Sir Barristan nodded to her, apologizing for his request. Brienne looked at Greene, who shook his head slightly, and said, "Sir Barristan, Brienne of Tarth is my personal guard." He picked up the wineglass, swirled it lightly, and continued, "I trust her, and I will have no secrets in front of her. As my personal guard, she needs to know all the people who can get close to me. Only in this way can she discern who is my enemy." Taking a sip of the summer red, Greene added, "She also needs to judge who is a potential enemy that threatens my safety, Sir Barristan." Chapter 290, Greene and the True Dragon, End. After speaking, Greene leaned back in his chair and quietly observed Sir Barristan. Upon hearing Greene's reminder, Barristan Selmy nodded and apologized. "I was presumptuous." He added, "As you said, I believe Miss Brienne also knows the true identity of Her Highness the Princess." After a brief pause, the old knight continued, "I heard." He hesitated, then rephrased, "Her Royal Highness the Princess told me that you promised to reveal her identity and hold a wedding with her within a year." Greene lowered his eyes slightly and tapped the armrest with his fingers. Seeing Sir Barristan looking at him silently, he raised one hand slightly in a gesture of invitation. The old knight's eyes were profound. "Please forgive me, but your decision is very impulsive and will put Her Highness the Princess in a dangerous situation, Earl Greene." Realizing his words might have been too direct, he added, "Perhaps we should not underestimate the strength of the usurper. If a common enemy appears, they will still choose to unite because this concerns the existence of their families." There was a moment of silence in the study. Greene Kleb made the gesture of invitation again. Sir Barristan stared at the calm-looking Greene for a while, then exhaled and said, "I've finished, Lord Greene." Greene nodded and asked, "Old sir, I would like to ask, who do you belong to?" Sir Barristan frowned slightly and replied, "I will always be loyal to Her Highness the Princess until death." "Yes, your current identity is the Princess's loyal guard," Greene added. "Old sir, I would like to ask, where is this place? Also, what is the relationship between me and the Princess? Please answer these two questions seriously." Sir Barristan frowned and thought for a moment before answering the seemingly simple questions. "This is the Gates of the Moon, and she is your fiancée." After hesitating for a moment, the old knight cautiously added, "You are the princess's fiancé." "Thank you for your candor. But—" Greene placed the wineglass in his hand on the table and continued, "one thing is not specific enough. Old sir, the Gate of the Moon is one of the territories of the Kleb family." He spread his hands. "As my future wife, the princess will share my glory. At the same time, she also has the obligation to maintain Kleb's rule." The old knight was a little confused after hearing this. Although his face remained calm, his heart was full of doubts. Earl Greene seemed to be talking about the traditional responsibilities and obligations of a wife in Westeros, but what exactly did the young ruler want to express to him? He really didn't like word games. He pointed at himself and said, "I'm sorry, Earl Greene. I'm old, and my mind can't match the cleverness of young people." The old knight's face was full of traces of time. "Perhaps I am more suited to more direct words here." "Thank you for your candor, sir." Greene's eyes narrowed slightly as he said, "What I mean is, you seem to be intending to shake Kleb's rule, Barristan Selmy." Sir Barristan was initially surprised, then stood up and said, "Earl Greene, although I have no honor, I will not accept slander." Greene raised his hand to signal Brienne to step back. He stood up slowly. "Old sir, this is not slander. It is a fact." He took a step forward. "You warned me about the danger of revealing the princess's identity in advance. That's because, after seeing the three dragons, you had hope of restoring the old order before you lost your honor, right?" He gradually approached. "As long as there is enough time, you are very sure, because sooner or later they will grow into real dragons, just like Aegon the Conqueror's 3 dragons. Greene stood in front of Sir Barristan. "Among them, what do you think of Kleb? A thug or a guard? Is the huge Kleb territory just a dragon's nest?" Barristan shook his head. "I never thought that way." "I'm very fortunate that you are the princess's fiancé," Sir Barristan said. "Very good. This shows that you still retain the heart of a knight. But—" Greene looked directly at the old knight. "The unintentional actions you mentioned will lead to the consequences I described, Sir Barristan." He added, "My ruling area includes the Crabclaw Peninsula and the Valley. It can also be said that I don't even have an heir, and the same is true for the princess's family. We are about to form a new family, and her children and I will inherit everything. As the princess's iron guard, you put Klebo on the opposite side of the princess. Think about it. Isn't this undermining Klebo's rule?" Greene observed the old knight's expression grow heavy and continued, "Your unintentional act is going to destroy the greatest power protecting the princess. Is this the path of atonement you speak of, old knight?" Hearing Greene's cruel facts, the fearless Barristan took a half-step back unconsciously and murmured, "How could I? This is impossible." Greene said directly, "Although you are on the road to atonement, your eyes are still blinded by your pride. Every decision you make is as arrogant as before. I think, in today's meeting, you didn't even consider the princess's own thoughts. You once again arrogantly made a decision for someone else, sir." Greene turned around and said as he walked, "I am not Aerys II, nor Robert Futh." Sir Barristan remained stunned in place. Greene sat back in his chair and said, "I hope you can listen to my honest words, and I hope there won't be another time. This is a solemn warning." After Sir Barristan left in a daze, Brienne glanced at Greene from time to time. Greene leaned on the armrest and smiled, looking at her. "Brienne, what do you want to say?" Brienne's thick lips moved, and she said, Lord Greene, seeing Sir Selmy's condition, can he fulfill his duties well? Greene chuckled and said, the old knight will understand. He is the fearless Barristan. Brienne hesitated for a while and asked, is Sir Barristan reliable? Lord Greene was very patient with Brienne. He explained, he has value that cannot be replaced by others. He can only be loyal to the princess, but the premise is that it cannot affect Klebo's right to rule. He picked up his glass. This is exactly the purpose of what I said to the old knight. The sun gradually rose, and warm sunlight shone into the room. Greene squinted his eyes, took a sip of wine, and said, the order under power cannot tolerate negligence. This is similar to fighting. If you want to deal with the enemy with all your strength, you must first. Listening to Greene's words, Brienne suddenly remembered what happened before and interrupted awkwardly. My lord, I just want to be your guard until I can no longer perform my duties. Greene was stunned. He remembered the time when he wanted to appoint Brienne as a knight of the Bloodgate. He raised his face and smiled. Okay, I respect your wishes. We will finish from the beginning. Hearing Greene's promise, Brienne smiled happily like a child. Tuck, tuck, tuck. After a knock on the door, the figure of housekeeper Sulana appeared at the door. My master, Her Royal Highness the Princess, invites you to have breakfast. Lord Greene worked hard every day. 3 days later, Greene led an army consisting of 100 Valley cavalry and 200 clan soldiers, with a total of nearly 1,000 horses, out of the Bloodgate. Chapter 291. The good night of the Lioness Night had fallen over the Queen Mother's bedroom in Megta. Cersei Lannister stood by the window, her golden curls cascading over her shoulders, shimmering faintly in the moonlight. She wore a snow-white nightgown made of soft, smooth material. In her hand, she held a wine glass, the candlelight reflecting off the summer red wine within, which rippled slightly as she moved. Queen Cersei stood barefoot on the cool stone slabs, seemingly unaffected by the chill. A gentle breeze blew in from the window, lifting her hair. She took a sip of her wine and asked, Are you sure? Osney Kettleblack, who had been secretly admiring Cersei's alluring figure, replied, Yes, your majesty, it is absolutely true. His Adam's apple bobbed as he continued. I disguised myself as a monk and overheard some of Sir Lancel's confession to the archbishop. He mentioned spirits, and you. He was crying. But I couldn't hear everything clearly because of the distance. Cersei's voice was cold as she asked, Lovely Osney, have you seen Lancel with your own eyes? Sir Osney swallowed nervously and answered, Yes, although Sir Lancel survived his serious injury, his brown hair has turned gray, and he is now as fragile as an old man. A sneer curled at the corner of Cersei's lips. He is indeed a useless coward, stupid and weak. She drained her wine in one gulp, placed the glass on a nearby small round table, and then said, Come here, Osney. As you command. Osney approached her. Cersei looked out the window at the night sky and said, Stand beside me. To Osney, her voice sounded like the call of the 7 gods. He suppressed his excitement and said, Yes, your majesty the Queen Mother. He stood beside her, pretending to admire the starry night. From the corner of his eye, he occasionally glanced at her, and Cersei's mouth curled up slightly. The bright moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery brilliance over Magda. Cersei raised her graceful chin, knowing exactly when a man was most obedient. Sir, is your sword sharp? She asked gently, turning to look at her young guard with jewel-like blue eyes. Osney's body turned involuntarily, and the sight of her seemed to glow. He quickly looked away and took a step back. I'm sorry. Please forgive my presumption. A clear, seductive laugh reached his ears, and Cersei's rose-colored lips parted slightly. It's really cute. She approached Osney, extending her soft hand. Osney, I haven't heard your answer yet. With a gentle touch, Osney's body froze. He immediately replied, I am your sharpest sword. Cersei added, Will you watch your Queen Mother be slandered? The pressure of her grip increased gradually, and Osney gasped, I absolutely will not let that happen. Cersei showed a look of satisfaction. I can't let anyone find out. Many people are watching me. Your Majesty, all you need to do is tell me the target, Osney said, his breathing heavy. The High Septon! The High Septon! Hiss! Osney exclaimed. Cersei's beautiful eyes fixed on him, murmuring seductively, Reward an extremely loyal knight with a night of pleasure. You have served your Queen Mother outstandingly, and you deserve a reward. Sir Osney hesitated. Cersei withdrew her hand, touched his cheek, and asked, "Are you scared, my good knight?" Freed from her grip, Osney felt a deep sense of loss. He looked directly at Cersei with bloodshot eyes, and then Osney Kettleblack fell into despair. The young knight could not resist Cersei's beauty, and he also wanted to have her. Queen Cersei possessed both power and beauty. "Your Majesty the Queen Mother, I am yours, and at your command," Sir Osney had said before leaving. After he departed, Queen Cersei slipped on her soft, gold-rimmed slippers. She hummed softly, picked up the flagon, and poured wine into her cup. "A month at most," she mused, approaching the window and taking a sip of summer red wine, her mood buoyant. The corners of her mouth curled up proudly. When her two swords returned, even the old lion would not be able to force her hand. As the wine in her glass dwindled, Queen Cersei's eyes narrowed. That idiot Lancel must be expelled from King's Landing before Jaime returns. It would be best. The face of the old lion suddenly appeared in her mind. Queen Cersei pondered for a moment and finally abandoned a more effective method. Clutching the wine glass tightly, she snorted coldly. Rumor had it that when Robb Stark announced the specific time of his wedding to Jane, Blackwalder burned the direwolf flag in the military camp. Afterwards, Blackwalder led the Twin City Army and left Riverrun. Not long after, news emerged that Tyrion Lannister, the second son of Duke Tywin, was discussing a marriage with the Tully family. On his way, after receiving a messenger crow from Lord Walder, Blackwalder hurried back to Riverrun. After meeting King Robb, Blackwalder humbly begged for forgiveness and presented a large number of jewels to show the Frey family's blessing for the wedding of Robb and Jane. In Riverrun, as negotiations proceeded, Tyrion hung the roaring lion banner of House Lannister outside the inn he had booked. His tongue danced drunkenly as he spoke. "I like the golden corridors and the lion's mouth in Casterly Rock the most, as well as the Hall of Heroes. When the tide comes, the sound of thunder can be heard there." Edmure Tully didn't seem to hear Tyrion's passionate words. He took a dull sip of wine. Tyrion glanced at the listless Edmure and, while pouring wine for him, said, "Edmure, tomorrow is your nephew's wedding. You should be happy." "Of course I'm happy. Although time is short, I use the best for everything," Edmure replied, sipping his wine. He stared at Tyrion, who was smiling, and couldn't help but ask, "Why are our peace talks always delayed?" "Edmure, you know I am very sincere," Tyrion shrugged, spreading his hands helplessly. "The problem is that the Lannister-Tyrell coalition must withdraw from the Riverlands. My request is to sign a marriage agreement before withdrawing, but King Stark's request is that our army must leave the Riverlands first before discussing your marriage to my sister." Edmure frowned. "Why do I feel like another war is about to break out?" Tyrion scratched his cheek. "Edmure, you have seen that Lannister is very sincere," he said with a hint of worry in his voice. "Probably not." Tyrion patted Edmure's shoulder, trying to comfort him. "A wonderful marriage is like a delicious fruit. It takes time to ripen. If you wait a little, it will be sweeter." He grinned. "Sweet and ripe fruit, bursting with juice when you take a bite." Edmure coughed slightly and changed the subject stiffly. "Tomorrow, Robb's wedding will entertain everyone in Riverrun. I have specially prepared a good place for you, Tyrion." "Edmure, thank you so much. This opportunity is rare. I will enjoy it." Tyrion paused, his expression turning gloomy, and he sighed softly. Edmure asked in confusion, "What's the matter, my friend?" Chapter 292, The Wedding. Tyrion shook his head silently. Seeing his sad expression, Edmure asked, "Is it because of the negotiation?" "It doesn't matter. Don't mind me. I just get upset when I see the Frey family's weasel faces. I have the patience to wait. As you said, the fruits take time to brew." Tyrion forced a smile and replied, "Thank you, Edmure. I know this is a good thing. To be honest, I also look forward to the Lannisters and Tullys becoming a family as soon as possible." His smile turned bitter. "I was reminded of Jaime when you mentioned the wedding that everyone can attend." Tyrion sighed again, and Edmure looked confused. "Sir Jaime is Robb's prisoner." "Aye." Tyrion noticed the vigilance in Edmure's eyes and quickly interrupted. "No, Edmure, I will not make such an excessive request." He smiled slyly. "Jaime has been chained to the wall for a long time. He has been punished. Taking advantage of the excitement of King Stark's wedding, unlock him and at least make him more comfortable in the cell. okay?" He grinned. "If he can share some of the wine and food at the wedding, the Lannisters will always remember Lord Edmure's kindness and generosity." Edmure pondered for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I can arrange this." Seeing that Edmure agreed, Tyrion picked up the jug and poured wine like a cupbearer. His face was full of gratitude. "Edmure, my sister Cersei will be grateful for your kindness all her life. My poor sister has finally found a truly good husband, thanks to the 7 gods for their blessing." Hearing the compliment, Edmure straightened his back unconsciously. Although Tyrion was a dwarf, he was the second son of Duke Tywin and had also been the Queen's prime minister. He was in a good mood. Tyrion's smile was very flattering. "My future brother-in-law, let Jaime have a good sleep tonight." Late at night, Riverrun Castle. Brynden Tully stopped his nephew who had just returned. He frowned and said, "Edmure, tomorrow is King Robb's wedding. As his uncle, you should rest early." Edmure's drunken blue eyes seemed to ask, "Why haven't you rested yet?" Sir Brynden sighed secretly and said patiently, "Edmure, I am getting old. Everyone would rather see King Robb standing next to an energetic heir to Riverrun and the king's uncle." Edmure scratched his head and said, "Uncle, don't worry. I will take good care of Robb." Sir Brynden nodded, and before Edmure entered the room, he reminded him again, "Before the negotiation ends, stay away from the Lannister messenger, Edmure." Edmure paused in his steps and said drunkenly, "Okay, I will, Uncle." In the dormitory, Jenny Westerling stood up and said, "Mother?" Sibel Spicer looked slightly older. She and her daughter both had curly chestnut hair and brown eyes. Her manners were dignified and elegant. Lady Cybele stepped forward and gently held Jenny's hand, saying, "Let me see you. You seem to be uneasy?" Jenny was silent for a while and whispered, "I want to try my best to take good care of Robb, but I feel like I can't help him. I don't know what to do." Patting the back of Jenny's hand, Lady Cybele said gently, "My good daughter, let's sit down and talk about what happened." The two of them sat down on the bench in the room. Seeing that Jenny was silent again, Lady Cybele comforted her. "Jenny, don't be sad alone. I am your mother. Even if I can't help you, at least it will make you feel better to talk about it." Jenny shook her head slightly. "I just don't know what to say, Mother." After a pause, she said slowly, "Robb, he hasn't eaten much since he executed Lord Karstark. Today, I had Loram, Jenny's younger brother, Robb's attendant, bring a sumptuous dinner of roasted boar ribs, onions, and his favorite ale, but he didn't eat much. Every night, he sits in front of the map and looks at it silently. I asked him what he was looking for, but he didn't say anything. I don't think he even heard me." The corners of her eyes were red. "Robb is lonely and angry. He is so pitiful. I want to be a good wife to him, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how to encourage him and cheer him up. I don't know what he needs." Jenny held Mrs. Shibbol's time-worn hand tightly and pleaded, "Mother, please teach me what to do." Lady Shibbol gently wiped the corner of Jenny's eyes with her thumb and said warmly, "Jenny, when you decided to marry King Robb, I told you that you are more than just a wife. Tomorrow is your wedding with the king. You are marrying the king of the kingdom. What I can tell you is that you have to learn to be patient and understand your king. Sometimes doing nothing and offering silent companionship is also a kind of support. He loves you and needs you, and I am sure your king will return to you soon." Jenny nodded slightly. Mrs. Shibbol rubbed her daughter's little face and continued, "My daughter, the king must have an heir. This is the responsibility and obligation of the queen. This is what King Robb needs your help with the most." Jenny said shyly, "Robb also understands his responsibility. Except for those days after the execution, we try every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. Every night, I pray to the Holy Mother. I believe that soon I will be pregnant with Robb's heir." Mrs. Shibbol looked at her daughter, whose cheeks were blushing, paused, and said, "As usual, I will prepare a drink for you every morning. It is a recipe my grandmother taught me. It uses herbs, milk, and ale, and it will help you get pregnant as quickly as possible." Jenny's mother had given birth to 4 children for her father. She hugged Mrs. Shibbol with emotion and gratitude. Mrs. Shibbol's hand froze slightly, and she said, "Every night I will pray to the gods for you, my good daughter." The next day, Robb and Jenny's wedding was grand and magnificent. In the church of Riverrun, the Bishop of the Riverlands, personally presided over the ceremony. Robb and Jenny stood in front of the tall statues of the Heavenly Father and the Virgin. Jenny Westerling wore a blue dress that represented purity and loyalty, and her cloak was the sandy gold of the Westerling family. Robb Stark wore a black slim robe, and his cloak was the silver gray of the Stark family. Under the witness of the gods, Robb and Jenny swore 7-fold marriage vows, received 7 levels of blessings, and exchanged 7 promises. Then, in keeping with tradition, the Bishop of the Riverlands asked those watching if anyone had any doubts about the wedding. At this moment, many people secretly looked in the direction of the Fry family. Black Walder, who was standing at the front, just grinned, revealing a pair of jagged yellow teeth. No one came forward to question or challenge, and the hymn of the 7 gods was sung. It was time to change the cloaks. After putting on each other's cloaks, King Robb solemnly placed the queen's crown on Jenny. Amidst various blessings, he lowered his head and kissed his queen deeply. The Bishop of the Riverlands solemnly announced, "From now on, King Robb Stark and Queen Jenny Westerling will be one body, one mind, and one soul. May the gods bless them." As soon as his words fell, there was a wave of cheers. After the wedding ceremony ended, Brendan Tully, Great John, and Jenny's brother, Sir Leonard, led the way with more than 20 stark gray robes, leading the procession out of the sept. King Robb and Queen Jenny followed, and the queen's youngest brother, Loram, carried a basket and scattered flower petals for them. Next came Edmure Tully and Jenny's father, Gavin Westerling, followed closely by Elenia Westerling, the youngest sister of Lady Shybel, and Jenny. Then there were the vassals of the North and the Riverlands, led by Lord Rosebolton and Black Walder. Finally, there was Tyrion and others who had been shrinking in a corner. After walking out of the sept, Tyrion took a deep breath of fresh air, limped around on his short legs, and said, "Bronn, before attending the wedding banquet, I want to take a quick walk." Finding a slightly hidden place, Tyrion glanced at the little squire who stood silently behind him and said in a complaining tone, Podrick Payne, if you need to pee, do it away from me." Although Podrick was confused by Tyrion's strange order, he obediently walked to another spot. Seeing this, Bronn grinned. "Sir, Pod is very innocent. He probably doesn't understand why you want him to stay away at this time. Sooner or later, he will understand. Well, I plan to help him. Don't look at me like that. I'm only responsible for paying. I'll help him understand the pleasures of a man's bed. The bed." After shaking off, Tyrion straightened his clothes and muttered, "The little running wolf is sweeping across the west. He can win on the battlefield, but he may lose the war in his bed." Bronn glanced around sharply and lowered his voice. "Master Tyrion, this is a wolf's den." Tyrion shrugged. "I'm a little disappointed. Little Running Wolf's bride is not as stunningly beautiful as I imagined. If Cersei knew this, she would be even more proud." Bronn asked doubtfully, "Queen Cersei still cares about such things?" Tyrion grinned. "Cersei cares about people who are prettier than her, and I discovered it accidentally. I also wanted to use the beauty of the little Lady Runwolf to get my good sister to leave Megta on her own initiative." Sigh. Bronn looked at Tyrion, who was sighing, and couldn't help but sigh himself. "My lord, the Lannisters are indeed a family that loves each other." Dusk was still an hour away, but the main hall of Riverrun was already brightly lit, with torches on every ledge. The guests who had arrived stood behind the long table. The lords and ladies entering were announced by the herald, then guided to their prearranged seats by the waiters. The hall was filled with musicians, including drummers, flutists, fiddlers, and others playing horns, harps, and leather bagpipes. When King Robb and Queen Jane appeared, the maids scattered countless brightly colored petals. After everyone was seated, the Bishop of Haegion led the people in the hall in prayer. After the prayer, King Robb announced, "Pour out the wine." At his command, the waiters and maids began filling the wine glasses in front of the guests. King Robb smiled, raised his cup, and said loudly, "To my wife, Queen Jane." "Long live Queen Jane." Great John took the lead in shouting, "Your Highness the Queen. Long live Queen Jane. Long live Queen Jane. Long live Queen Jane. Ho, 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 ho." Under the influence of the northern vassals, the hall echoed with the characteristic war cry of their ancestors. Hundreds of wine glasses clinked simultaneously, marking the official start of King Rob and Queen Jane's wedding banquet. The musicians played the sweet tune, My Beloved Wife, and King Rob and Queen Jane exchanged smiles. In the extremely lively atmosphere, one cup followed another, and night soon shrouded the high windows. The Great John and other northern vassals approached the king and queen's table with wine glasses in hand. The Great John, already red-faced from drinking, said loudly, "King Rob, please don't worry. I guarantee that the queen will be in your bed without a single strip of cloth." The bridal chamber is a custom in Westeros that occurs after a wedding and a wedding feast. The guests carry the bride and groom to the bed. Along the way, the men lift the bride and gradually remove her clothes, while the women do the same to the groom. They then throw the undressed groom and bride onto the bed before leaving the room. Afterwards, they stand outside the bridal chamber and shout advice about the wedding night through the door. As if mobilizing before a war, Great John turned around and raised his wine glass. "Long live Queen Jane!" "Ho, roar, roar!" All the men responded in unison. Daisy Mormont, the heir to the Countess of Bear Island, shouted to Queen Jane, "Your Majesty, may your night be filled with joy and love. Your Highness, we guarantee that you will see a naked king in bed." Everyone burst into laughter, and King Rob looked at the shy queen with a smile on his face. From morning till now, the smile on the face of the always calm King Rob had almost never stopped. He warned these rude noble ancestors, "If you scare away my beautiful bride, I will not forgive you." Robb Stark's joke was simple, but it was rare enough to make everyone laugh. Black Walder roughly squeezed through the crowd standing around the king's table and came to the front. He grinned at Queen Jane sitting opposite. "Queen Jane, the people of the Riverlands are not as rude as the people of the North." While speaking, he stared at the neck of Queen Jane, his eyes showing a lewd light, and he also rubbed his hands. Robb's blue eyes flashed with a cold look, and at the same time, there was a sudden silence around him. Hiss! Great John punched Black Walder in the head. Black Walder screamed in pain and hit the table in front of the king and queen, causing a mess of cups and plates. Great John, who was about to step forward, was held firmly by the people around him. Black Walder was reluctantly supported by other Walders, and his face was covered with blood. At this moment, Edmure pushed through the crowd and came to the front. Behind him was Sir Brynden. Edmure was very angry. "Black Walder, don't force me to punish you." Blood flowed from Black Walder's forehead, cheeks, and corners of his mouth. He wiped it casually with his big hand, slowly showed a strange smile, and said, "I drank too much because I was too happy. Please forgive me, Your Grace." Edmure's fists tightened, and then he looked at King Rob, who was sitting upright. Seeing Edmure's gaze shift, King Rob said nothing but nodded his chin slightly. Edmure was pleased that Rob had left the reins in his hands, feeling that his nephew was trusting him more and more. He looked at the other Walders who were supporting Black Walder and said thoughtfully, "He is drunk. You should keep an eye on him." Edmure wanted to expel Black Walder from the wedding banquet, but after thinking about it, he gave up the plan. He didn't want to cause any real unpleasantness at his nephew's wedding. The maids heard Edmure's instructions and quickly cleared the king's table. The musicians started playing again, and the atmosphere in the hall soon soothed. Edmure, the heir of Riverrun, signaled the waiter to pour the wine, and then he raised the wine glass high-spiritedly and said in a loud voice, "For the health of the king and queen." People around raised their glasses. "For the health of the king and queen." The people around the table dispersed, leaving only Edmure and Sir Brynden. "Good work, uncle." Rob gently held one of Jane's hands and continued, "There is no better wedding than this. Thank you for everything you have done for me." Queen Jane also expressed her sincere gratitude, while Sir Brynden looked pleased. Edmure was not only excited, but also seemed a little shy when faced with the sudden flood of compliments. Unable to restrain the upward curling of the corners of his mouth, Edmure casually grabbed a small piece of meat from the table and put it into his mouth in order to maintain his humble image. After chewing a few times, Edmure swallowed the food, took another sip of wine, and said, "Rob, we are a family. I will always cough." With a bang, the cup in his hand suddenly fell, and dark red wine flowed on the stone slabs on the ground. "Ahem, Cough, cough. Edmure's face turned redder and redder. He stretched out his hands to scratch at his throat, his nails digging bloody marks on the skin, but the muscles underneath were as hard as stone. Cough, cough, cough. The whites of Edmure's eyes protruded. He seemed to want to speak, but he could only make a rough voice. Uncle? Edmure? Lying in Sir Brendan's arms, Edmure's pupils gradually expanded. The hall was filled with the sound of the musicians playing, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding. Chapter 293, Hot Blood. The handsome young singer continued to sing heartily with his eyes closed. It's the rainy season. I'm going to ride a horse. Hello. It's the rainy season. Women sew clothes. Hey, hey. On the haystack, the woman is being kissed. Hi, yay. Hi, hey, 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 hey. The hall began to descend into chaos. What's wrong? What happened? Gods, what happened to Lord Edmure? Something happened to Lord Edmure. Queen Jane exclaimed in disbelief. Oh, gods! King Robb didn't have time to take a closer look at his uncle, who was motionless with his eyes open. He shouted, Maester, where is the Maester? Sir Brendan knelt there, holding Edmure in his arms as he stiffened and grew cold. He went to meet the stranger. Sir Brendan was already in tears, and with trembling, wrinkled hands he closed Edmure's eyelids. King Robb said in disbelief, Impossible, impossible, so fast. Where is the Maester? Where is the Maester? By the way, Jane knows medical skills, Jane. He turned his head and shouted loudly, Jane! Jane! King Robb's voice brought the frightened Jane back to her senses. She hurriedly stood up, lifted her skirt, and walked quickly towards Edmure. As she got close, Queen Jane suddenly stopped. She felt a sharp pain, her body shaking involuntarily, and she covered her stomach tightly with her hands. King Robb turned his head again and urged, Jane, you? Puff! Queen Jane suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Her eyes turned red, and King Robb's face was covered with Queen Jane's blood as he knelt beside Edmure. King Robb was stunned when he felt the hot blood. He reached out to catch Queen Jane and hugged her tightly. He was in a panic. Jane, Jane, look at me, look at me. There was no response, and Queen Jane's eyes gradually lost life. Robb Stark screamed in pain, No! At this time, Roose Bolton, who was standing in the crowd, looked at Jane in Robb's arms and frowned slightly. Then, a pair of light-colored eyes suddenly looked to another part of the crowd. Roose saw Black Walder staring at Edmure with unconcealable shock on his big, swollen, and bloody face. It was a complete mess. Some people were crying, some were staggering, some were vomiting, and some were rushing towards the gate without hesitation. Roose Bolton strode out, looking at Robb's northern vassals with winter-like eyes. For the first time, everyone present heard him speak loudly. Northerners, maintain order. His voice rose again. No one is allowed to leave. Anyone who disobeys will be killed. Before the people from the north could respond, Black Walder took the lead and responded loudly. Twin City, didn't you hear Earl Bolton's order? No one is allowed to leave. Protect the king. Not long after, the thick oak door of the main castle hall slowly closed, making a dull and loud noise. In a hidden place to the west of River Run, Tyrion held on to the wall and panted. My short legs almost broke. During the wedding banquet, although Tyrion was arranged in a remote location near the gate, he had been paying attention to the little running wolf's words and deeds. His purpose was to learn as much as possible about the young ruler. When something unusual happened to Edmure, Tyrion decisively sneaked out of the main castle during the wedding banquet with Bronn, the young attendants, and others. Bronn's breathing became slightly heavier, and he looked back in the direction of the main castle and said, Sir, will this cause any misunderstanding? Tyrion wiped the sweat from his face, waved his hand, and said, We'll talk about it later. The 7 gods will bless others in their hometown. It's best to misunderstand. After a while, a Lannister in a red robe trotted over. He calmed down and said, Lord Tyrion, the door to the main castle is closed. There was a hint of panic in his voice. Edmure Tully is dead. Tyrion's pupils shrank, and Bronn said to him, My lord, you saved us. It also saved myself. I really didn't expect. Tyrion took off the money bag from his waist. Tyrion tossed the money bag to Bronn and said, We must leave. People who have lost their minds won't listen to reason. He fixed his gaze on Bronn. It's dangerous to stay. If we escape alone, Lord Tywin will never forgive us. We must take Jaime with us. Bronn weighed the money bag in his hand and grinned. "This isn't enough, Lord Tyrion." Tyrion also grinned. "This is just a small appetizer. A Lannister always pays his debts." Bronn put the money bag away, patted it, and said, "My lord, I am at your disposal." Tyrion spoke quickly. "Adam Marbrand, Jaime's childhood friend and Tywin's appointed monitor, is near the cell. He will appear when he hears 3 bird calls. He has clothes prepared in advance. You will dress up as a Riverrun guard and bring Jaime out. Before coming out, help him change into the guard's clothes." Seeing that Tyrion was well prepared, Bronn said easily, "Then what? After such a big incident, I think the gates of Riverrun will be closed soon. Come to the west wall, where I peed into the river 3 days ago. When you get there, listen for 3 bird calls." Tyrion reached out and patted Bronn's thigh. He urged, "Be quick. We don't have much time. Climb down the city wall and get on the raft I have hidden by the river. We will be safe, my Blackwater River Knight." "For the sake of the Golden Dragon." Bronn smiled and strode away. Watching Bronn disappear into the night, Tyrion secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had prepared for the worst. That night, Edmure Tully, the heir to Riverrun, was poisoned and died. King Robb's queen, Jane Westerling, was also poisoned and died. The terminally ill Lord Hoster Tully, upon hearing the news of his heir's murder, left his younger brother, Brynden Tully, to inherit Riverrun on his deathbed. In the pale morning light, Queen Jane seemed to be sleeping. The silent sisters, wrapped tightly from head to toe with only their eyes exposed, stood not far away. Robb's face was pale and haggard, his eyes bloodshot. He stood beside his wife, motionlessly guarding her. Sir Brynden, who seemed to have aged overnight, entered the sept with heavy steps, followed by Lord Roose and Maester Waymon of Riverrun. Sir Brynden approached Robb and patted him. His voice was filled with sadness. "I thought I was used to life and death. I don't even know how to comfort you now, my son." Robb closed his eyes for a moment and then opened them again. "Uncle, in the north, there is no mercy. Blood debts must be repaid with blood." Lord Roose and Maester Waymon saluted Robb. "Your Majesty." Robb stared at his sleeping wife and said in a hoarse voice, "How's it going?" Maester Waymon glanced at Lord Roose, and seeing that he was silent, spoke first. "King Robb, there are 2 kinds of poisons. Lord Edmure was killed by the Strangler, a powerful poison that quickly suffocates its victims. It has the same symptoms as choking to death." After a pause, he continued, "The poison that killed Queen Jane is very similar to the Devil's Dance Grass. It causes severe abdominal pain, vomiting blood, and instant death." Robb's hand gently touched his wife's face. "Have you found the murderer?" Chapter 294, Loyalty and Betrayal. Count Luce's answer was brief. "Still interrogating." Robb turned his head and looked at Count Luce, his eyes cold. "Bolton, who do you think it could be?" Count Luce's light-colored eyes met Robb's for a moment before he spoke softly. "Your Majesty, doubt will make you lose your impartial heart." Robb looked away and murmured, "Justice." He said painfully, "If it were fair, I should be the one to see the stranger, not my uncle and my beloved wife." The young Wolf Lord's eyes seemed to burn with fire. He looked at Count Luce again and demanded in a deep voice, "Answer my question." Count Luce seemed unfazed by Robb's anger. He looked at Maester Waymon calmly and said, "Your Majesty, he also knows my suspicions." Robb's eyes moved to Maester Waymon. "Your Majesty, it is very likely that the poisonous wine was given to Great John during the conflict with Black Walder." "That was the best opportunity," Maester Waymon explained. Sir Brynden interjected, "Maester Waymon, have you interrogated the waiter and maid who served the wine at that time?" Maester Waymon nodded first, then shook his head and sighed. "It was very chaotic at the time. Of the 7 waiters and 7 maids present, only 2 waiters and 3 maids are still alive. We interrogated them and found nothing suspicious." Robb frowned and asked, "Why did so many people die?" Count Luce explained, "Most of the ladies and lords in the hall are from the Riverlands. The situation last night could not be controlled without casualties." After a moment's hesitation, he added, "The Fry family contributed significantly to the chaos." Robb paused before asking, "Bolton, is this the source of your suspicion?" Count Luce frowned and replied, "No, before I find witnesses or evidence, I will doubt everyone, Your Majesty." After Count Luce finished speaking, Robb remained silent. Maester Waymon couldn't help but add, Your Majesty, Blackwalder's actions are indeed suspicious. For example, his sudden offense. He continued, although he was trying to stop the chaos for you, he killed and smashed too many people's heads. Of course, everyone knows that Blackwalder is homicidal. King Robb whispered, there is no evidence. Sir Brynden placed a large hand on Robb's shoulder. My child, don't forget that you are our king. The two looked at each other, and Sir Brynden nodded slightly. Robb also nodded and said, Uncle, until the murderer is found, you will take over the defense of Riverrun. No one can enter or leave without your permission. Leave it to me, Sir Brynden replied. At this moment, Count Luce suddenly said, Your Majesty, the murderer is most likely two people. Seeing Robb's gaze shift, he added, I still suspect the Lannister envoys. They disappeared too quickly. Maester Waymon echoed, some people saw that Lord Edmure had just appeared abnormal, and they quietly left the wedding banquet, as if they had foreseen what would happen next. King Robb. Great John's voice boomed from the door. He entered the hall and said as he walked, the regicide is missing. Robb rubbed his temples and said, Be more specific, Great John. Last night, we were busy sealing all the houses and didn't pay attention to the situation inside. The servants discovered it when they were delivering food to the cell. The two guards guarding the Kingslayer were already dead. Robb gritted his teeth and said, Lannister. Count Roose looked at Robb and said, It seems that the Lannister envoy has been prepared for a long time. There are too many coincidences. It has to be suspicious. Robb said coldly, They have already planned it and were waiting for the opportunity to escape. His voice trembled with rage. Lannister. Great John. Prepare 500 cavalry. Pick the best riders, 1 person and 2 horses, and then select the 1,000 strongest horses. As you command, King Robb. Great John turned and left. Robb looked at Sir Brynden. Uncle, I will be back before the funeral. Sir Brynden opened his mouth slightly, sighed secret, T-L-I, and nodded. Count Luce frowned and stepped forward. Your Majesty, you should stay here and leave the pursuit of the regicide to me. Robb looked at Count Rose's stern face and said, Please keep a close eye on the Frye family, Count of the Dreadfort. He then gently covered his sleeping wife with a silver-gray cloak embroidered with a direwolf. That night, the Lannister party, having successfully escaped from Riverrun, rested on the bank of the Red Fork River. Tyrion leaned against a small tree, his muddy boots discarded beside him. Footsteps approached, and the bearded Jaime Lannister sat down next to him. Tyrion glanced at the bonfire not far away. Brother Jaime, you should keep warm. Jaime smiled, looking relaxed. I've been in the cell for so long, I'm still not used to the light. Tyrion chuckled. I'm sure you had your eyes closed the whole time on the raft. He picked up a wineskin, took a sip, and tossed it to Jaime. I know you want to kiss me out of gratitude. Use this instead. I only like the kisses of beautiful women, brother. Jaime laughed at his brother's jest. He took a swig from the wineskin and handed it back to Tyrion. I still want to say thank you, Tyrion. Tyrion shrugged. Save your thanks for when we arrive safely at King's Landing. He pointed to the dried blood on Jaime's left forearm. Is it serious? I've hidden the horses in the town ahead. If it's bad, find a doctor when you get the horses. We should avoid being seen. I'm worried little running wolf will send pursuers. It's just a minor injury, Jaime said nonchalantly. I've been in the cell for so long. My movements are sluggish. I just got a slash from a sword. Tyrion smiled, took another sip of wine, and fell silent. The surroundings were quiet, with only the occasional chirping of insects breaking the silence. The breeze caressed them, and Jaime stared into the distance, lost in thought. After a while, Jaime's voice broke the silence. Tyrion, is Cersei okay? Tyrion sighed and spread his hands. Jaime, you finally asked me something I didn't want to talk about. Under Jaime's slightly doubtful gaze, Tyrion continued. Jaime, listen to my advice and leave Cersei. She is not worthy of your loyalty. Loyal? Jaime's green eyes trembled slightly. After a pause, he said, It is my duty to protect her, Tyrion. Tyrion scratched his head, hesitated, and then said, Jaime, you may be loyal, but Cersei is not. I mean loyalty in bed. He pinched his chin. As for responsibilities, many people can take your place, and Cersei is also very happy. Jaime frowned, staring at his smiling brother. Tyrion, speak clearly. Tyrion spread his hands helplessly. Okay. He leaned forward slightly. Brother Jaime, when you were locked in that dark cell, many young and handsome knights were comforting Cersei, making her happy every day. He grinned. For example, our cousin. Although Lancel can't wield a sword as well as you, I heard that Cersei enjoys his company in bed very much. Chapter 295, Greene's Doubts. Tyrion! Sir Jaime shouted angrily. Realizing his tone was too harsh, he took a deep breath and softened his voice. Tyrion, don't make such jokes. Cersei is your sister, after all. Tyrion smiled, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Of course, she is my sister, and also your twin sister, Jaime. Sir Jaime was momentarily stunned, but then nodded slowly. Tyrion's grin widened. But Cersei is more than just your sister. Sir Jaime's expression froze. He stared at his brother for a long moment before saying, Stop joking, Tyrion. Before Jaime could change the subject, Tyrion's voice cut through the tension. Brother Jaime, I've known about you and Cersei for a long time. Perhaps I know more than you do. Sir Jaime's face grew complicated. Tyrion laughed. Actually, I admire you, Jaime Lannister. Not only did you kill King Targaryen, but you also inherited their family's old traditions. Sir Jaime remained silent, his lips moving slightly before he whispered, I love her. The smile faded from Tyrion's face. She is not worthy of your love. Jaime's face twisted in pain. She loves me too. Tyrion's voice turned mocking. Yes, she loves you, but you are just one of the people she opens her legs to. He stood up, crossing his arms. Cousin Lancel is also one of them. Jaime's mind reeled. Could everything Tyrion said be true? Was Tyrion deceiving him? No, Tyrion wouldn't lie to him. Sir Jaime grabbed his hair with both hands, shaking his head in agony. Impossible! Why? Tyrion stepped closer, his bare feet sinking into the grass. He reached out and grabbed Jaime's shoulders. End your delusions, or you will only suffer more. Sir Jaime sat alone by the river, unable to sleep. As dawn broke, the group prepared to depart. With a haggard face, Jaime approached Tyrion. I don't believe Cersei would betray me. I will confirm it with her personally. Tyrion shrugged. That's fine, but remember, sometimes the truth is harder to accept than lies. He added, Brother Jaime, don't forget that King's Landing has a cunning father and a little king who is very proud of being Robert's son. Jaime paused, glancing back at Tyrion before leaving. His retreating figure looked like that of a man running away. At dawn, they acquired the horses Tyrion had arranged in the dilapidated town. Rumors spread quickly, and the Lannister guards, disguised as mercenaries, brought bad news. Lord Tyrion, they say you killed Edmure Tully and King Stark. I also heard that King Stark left Riverrun with thousands of troops, vowing to execute you himself. Tyrion looked at the sky and sighed. They really think highly of me. Sir Jaime's face was pale. He forced a smile and joked hoarsely. The Lannister giant will become a nightmare for the people of the Riverlands. Tyrion scratched his head. I think they prefer to call me the Little Devil affectionately. To be honest, I only hope that the little running wolf will come to catch me in person. Running his fingers through his hair, Tyrion said sternly, Whether it's true or not, we should leave as soon as possible. If I'm caught, Lord Tywin won't care about my life or death. He looked at Jaime with concern. Brother, you look terrible. Jaime shook his head slightly. I'm fine. Let's leave quickly. Don't underestimate Stark's stubbornness. That little running wolf might actually lead troops to pursue us. I've had enough of cells. As soon as Jaime sat in the saddle, his childhood friend Adam Marbrand rode closer. Jaime, what's wrong with you? Jaime tugged at the reins. I'm all right, Adam. In the afternoon, as the group rode on, Sir Jaime swayed in the saddle, slowly tilting. 5 days later, at a roadside inn near the King's Road, north of the town of Earl of Harroway, the atmosphere was lively. In the center of the hall, a large roaring fire provided warmth. Hotel staff bustled about, serving steaming hot food and filling wine glasses for the guests. The air was thick with the rich aroma of wine and food. Guests sat around rough wooden tables, drinking and talking loudly. The Lannister imp slit Lord Edmure's throat with a purple sword, one guest exclaimed. Oh, my Lord Edmure, another cried out. I heard the imp drank Lord Edmure's blood from a chalice, someone added, horrified. Oh gods, this is so cruel. Please send down divine punishment, a voice pleaded. I heard Lord Edmure died of poisoning, another guest interjected. Yes, I also heard that Lord Edmure and the Queen were both poisoned to death. Someone confirmed. The Queen is dead? Which Queen? A confused guest asked. Haha, kings and queens are everywhere. Even the White Walkers can't count how many there are, another joked. She is the queen of the king of the trident, someone clarified. I'm telling the truth. She died at the wedding banquet in River Run. She was also poisoned, another voice insisted. Oh gods, who will dare to drink at a wedding banquet in the future? A guest lamented. Only noble gentlemen need to worry about that kind of thing. What does it have to do with us? Another guest shrugged. Next to the wooden railing upstairs, the Green Lord, with keen hearing, raised his eyebrows slightly. Was Edmure Tully really dead? Green's brown eyes trembled slightly. Who did it? Who could it be? Jane Westerling was also killed. Greene picked up his wineglass and swirled it slightly. It seemed that the person behind the scenes deliberately left Robb Stark behind. If these rumors were true... Greene's eyes narrowed slightly. The door to the hall downstairs suddenly opened, and Brienne strode in. The noisy crowd paused for a moment, then resumed their chatter. Thump, thump, thump. Brienne walked up the wooden stairs and hurried to where Greene was seated. She glanced at Menton, whose mouth was stuffed with barbecue, and leaned over to whisper in Greene's ear. After listening, Greene tapped his chin thoughtfully, then slowly drummed his fingers on the table. He was now certain. Edmure and Jane were indeed dead. Robb was leading troops to search for those who had escaped from Riverrun, Leon and James. Edmure Tully, Jaime, Tyrion, the wedding at Riverrun, the poisoning, Robb Stark, the Lannisters, Lord Tywin. Greene's eyes trembled. Was this to deepen the hatred between the Running Wolf and the Mad Lion? To poison the heirs of Riverrun, someone trusted by Tully or Stark would be indispensable as an internal agent, and there must be huge interests involved. Greene's slender fingers paused slightly. But why did the person behind the scenes include Jane Westerling? What was the purpose of this? If they wanted to deal with the Robb group, wouldn't it be more beneficial to keep Jane Westerling there? Wait. Normally, whether it was Jaime as a prisoner or Tyrion as a messenger, it would be difficult to escape from Riverrun in that situation. Could it be that the real target of the person behind the scenes was the two of them, or one of them? After meeting Tyrion and the others, Lord Greene could almost guess the real mastermind, but he could at least be sure of one thing at this moment. The Lannister brothers, who were still on the run, could be in danger at any time because the wolves were approaching. They were being chased. Chapter 296, Different Choices. Greene had the barbecue on the table taken away, and as the recipient, Menton laughed. After laying out the map of the Riverlands that he had bought with a lot of money on the now empty table, Greene lowered his head and studied it intently. Harrenhal was in the hands of the Lannisters, guarded by Sir Amory Lorch. His eyes lingered on its position for a while before moving slowly westward along the river road. After a pause, his finger pointed at the location of Riverrun, and then slowly moved eastward along the river avenue. If he wanted to find Tyrion and Jaime, he needed to spread his soldiers as far as possible, but this was not wise, as the Riverlands was still a battlefield. Therefore, the best way was to let Tyrion know where he was in the Riverlands. After thinking it over, as an upstart, Lord Greene decided to spend money. Anyone who could provide Greene with the whereabouts of Tyrion and others, or provide Tyrion with Greene's location, or an escort, could receive a generous bounty from Lord Greene. Being in the hostile camp of Stark and Tully, would Greene be targeted by them and put in danger by being so aggressive? Unless he was hot-headed, the plains of the Riverlands could not stop the more than 1,000 Valley warhorses he brought. After leaving the hotel, Greene handed over the arrangement of the bounty to Ongai, a former mercenary. After setting various reward amounts, the careful Lord Greene, in order to arouse the enthusiasm of more people as soon as possible, in addition to the Golden Dragon, also promised that in the future, the Valley would protect those Stark-Tully betrayers. Then, news of Greene Kleb's bounty spread again in the Riverlands at an unreasonable speed. 2 days later, the rays of the rising sun shone on the breeze-swept river. The banks of the Red Fork River were red soil as flat as a road. Small streams merged into the river, and the submerged rotten branches still leaned against the shore. Not far away were birches, oaks, and chestnut trees. Along the way, Greene and his entourage passed many crude cabins supported by long poles. There were no signs of habitation, only birds flying overhead or chirping strangely on the branches near the shore. The countless tributaries of the Trident River provided convenience for people and things to travel through the riverlands. When there was no war, Greene had heard that the river was full of small fishing boats, large grain ships, and merchants' pontoon boats. There were even colorfully painted and extremely fancy theater boats that would pass by the villages and castles along the coast. Now, the war between Stark Tully and Lannister had taken away everything. Greene passed by the village, but did not see any villagers. Near a big house, they saw a live oak tree full of dead women. They swayed and swayed in the breeze. In the team, the young Valley Cavalry said angrily, "Massacre! This is a shameless massacre! This is not an act of chivalry!" The nearby Valley Cavalry all echoed, "Damn butchers, don't forgive them." The corpse smelled of rotting fruit. Greene's eyes narrowed slightly. There was a wooden sign hanging around the neck of the highest corpse, which read, "A bitch sleeps with a lion." Many people also discovered the words on the wooden sign and said in disbelief, "Gods, it was Stark and Tully who did it. What evil did this poor woman do?" These Valley Cavalry, who followed Greene's bleeding gait, had not really seen the cruelty of war, and they kept rebuking them. Seeing Greene's silence, a new Valley Knight beside him said, "Lord Greene, they should be hotel maids." He pointed to the charred house. "I remember this inn. I spent the night here before the war started. I think these girls entertained the Lannister soldiers, so they got the traitor's collar. Maybe they just gave them food and drink, maybe. Just a kiss and a glass of ale." Greene tapped his chin, and what he saw and heard on the road told him that the Tully family's rule in the Riverlands was collapsing. Lord Hoster and his heir Edmure were losing his control. Tully had passed away. Although Lord Hoster's younger brother, Brynden Tully, inherited the title of Duke of Riverrun, more than 10 years had passed since he left the Riverlands. Unlike Edmure, Brynden didn't have the natural cohesion with the people. Moreover, Sir Brynden was already over 50 years old and had no children of his own. The vassals of the Riverlands faced the difficult problem of making a reasonable choice. To reconsolidate House Tully's rule in the Riverlands, Sir Brynden needed time and stability. However, the Riverlands also had Robb Stark, who claimed to be King of the North and the Trident. Duke Ned wanted to resist the invasion of the Iron Islands in the north, and Robb and Brynden would have no other support for a short time. It could be said that they only had an army that would become smaller and smaller as they fought, and Robb's dynasty was destined to be short-lived. Unless Robb's army could defeat the Lannisters in one fell swoop and conquer King's Landing, their situation seemed dire. Another option was to abandon the Riverlands and retreat to the north, giving up the King's crown and actively seeking peace with the Lannisters to prevent the Lannisters and Greyjoys from joining forces to attack the north. But this also meant that the Tully family's rule in the Riverlands would become history, and retreating to the north would mean that Robb had given up on the Tully family. The Tully family had no choice unless Brynden Tully sent Robb's head to the Red Keep. If he couldn't do that, he could only fight. The Lannister army, which had just defeated Stannis, needed to rest, but they would face the Stark-Tully coalition that was actively seeking war. Greene's eyes trembled. Dorne was too far away. It seemed that from Edmure's death, the biggest beneficiaries might be the Marigolds and Golden Roses. Greene's eyes moved slightly. Jane Westerling. Could it be that there was another person behind the scenes? A line of sight that moved from time to time made Greene withdraw his thoughts, and he looked at Brienne beside him. Seeing Greene looking at her, Brienne's thick lips twitched for a while before she said, "Lord Greene, they are innocent people. I want to bury them." Greene nodded slightly. "Brienne, you have the compassion of a knight. Go ahead and find a few more people." Thinking of Brienne's straightforward character, he directly ordered, "Sir, help Brienne bury those helpless people." The lower branches of the live oak tree were large enough for a person to stand on. Brienne climbed up the trunk, dagger in hand, and walked through the leaves, chopping down the corpses. When the bodies fell, flies suddenly surrounded them. The more bodies fell, the stronger the stench became. Below, some people were digging pits and others were moving the bodies. While they were busy, They occasionally reprimanded the butcher for his evil deeds. Under the direct sunlight, Lord Greene blinked, as if he saw the light of justice emanating from the Kleb soldiers. His ears twitched slightly, and the wailing sounds of the Riverlands seemed to be calling for its new ruler. Stopping to think, Greene's mouth curved slightly. He kicked the horse's belly lightly, and the horse walked towards the river. As the smoke plume spiraled up, Menton squinted his eyes and roasted the trout he had just caught from the river by the campfire. Far away, Greene sat on a folding wooden chair and looked at the map in his hand. The sound of horse hooves came from the distance. After a while, Ungai's figure appeared. He jumped off the horse and came to the front of Greene. He stroked his chest and said, "Lord Greene." Greene looked away from the map and asked, "Is there any news?" Ungai nodded and said, "There are 3 hunters, a pair of fishing father and son, and an old farmer's family. They have seen the Lannisters and their party. Because of the distance, most people regard Lord Tyrion as a child, and they are more convinced of the information provided by those people." After thinking for a moment, he continued, "According to the information provided by those people, they passed. Bent Knee Stand is located on the south bank of the bend of the Red Fork River. This is the place where Torrhen Stark, King of the North, surrendered to Aegon the Conqueror. Rumor has it that after the Battle of the Raging Prairie, King Torrhen personally led the Northern Army south. However, when he saw the dragon with his own eyes, he bent his knee and handed over the bronze and black iron sword crown." After listening, Greene stared at the map for a while and said, "Onge, we can narrow the search scope." James lay on the wooden board and looked at the clear night sky. The night was strangely beautiful, with an elegant crescent moon and a sky full of stars that he had never seen before. The crown seat was at the top of the sky, with the Horse and Cygnus constellations beside it. On the top of the pine tree branches, the shy moon lady was half hidden. Tyrion limped over. He knelt down and looked at the pus-filled wound and chapped lips on Jaime's forearm. The disheveled Tyrion called out, "Jaime, Jaime." The heat made Jaime dizzy, making him think he was dreaming. He moved with difficulty, tried to force out a smile, and responded hoarsely, "Tyrion." Looking at Jaime, who was extremely weak, Tyrion laughed. "What a pity. I thought you had already fallen into the arms of the Seven Gods. You are so disrespectful." "Ha, ha, cough." Jaime tried to laugh, but ended up coughing painfully. Tyrion looked at one part of Jaime's body unkindly and joked, "I don't know if it can be used in the future. Well, if unfortunately I tell you what I said, I just hope you don't become a gun-swallowing enthusiast." He trembled exaggeratedly. "Actually, as long as I don't focus on your dear brother, I don't mind." Cough, cough. Jaime coughed painfully again. Tyrion laughed for a while, then calmed down and sighed. "Brother Jaime, if you delay this any longer, you will die. You are in great need of medical treatment." Jaime Lannister opened his mouth and said with difficulty, "Tyrion, I would rather die. I don't want to be a prisoner anymore." Tyrion tried to persuade him. "Jaime, living is more important than honor." Jaime closed his eyelids and shook his head slowly. Living, more than 10 years ago, he did just that. Wrapped in a white robe, he watched the Starks and his son die tragically in front of his eyes. Duke Rickard, in full armor, was grilled, and his son Brandon was strangled to death in an attempt to save his father. Jaime did not choose honor then. Instead, he chose to shut up and hide in his heart, not looking or thinking. Jaime slowly opened his eyes. How could the night be so charming? He asked himself why the stars were willing to shed light on people like him. Chapter 297, The Miserable Scream. The linen wrapped around Jaime's forearm was gray and reeked of pus. His eyes were empty, devoid of life. "Well," Tyrion lay directly next to Jaime, his hands folded behind his head and one short leg crossed. He hadn't expected that confessing Cersei's infidelity would not provoke the anger he had imagined, but instead make Jaime lose his will to live. "Brother Jaime, aren't you going to ask her in person?" Jaime's eyes moved imperceptibly, and Tyrion's voice sounded again. "Aren't you curious? Why did Cersei do this?" Sensing he was getting through, Tyrion continued, "Perhaps Cersei, she has her own reasons." He pressed on. "Maybe she was forced?" His words flowed more smoothly now. "Cersei is alone in the Red Keep. Maybe she had no choice but to do it for Joffrey?" A fully awake Jaime would have dismissed Tyrion's ridiculous advice. He knew Cersei well, no one could force his lioness. But in his current state, Jaime was willing to believe it. Yes, he wasn't by Cersei's side, and she had no choice but to betray him. Cersei, her charming figure seemed to be right in front of him, reaching out helplessly. Tyrion was right. He couldn't die. Cersei was waiting for him. She needed him. Yes, Cersei was still alive, and he couldn't die. They were born on the same day, same month, and same year, and they would die on the same day, same month, and same year. Jaime's dim eyes finally had a glimmer of light. Tyrion, Jaime whispered. He wanted to tell his brother that he would survive, and they would return to the Red Keep alive together. There was no response for a long time. Jaime tilted his head slightly with difficulty. His brother, in his sight, had fallen asleep at some point. Jaime could feel Tyrion's fatigue staring at that face. No matter how he looked at his brother, he was still ugly, and the corners of his lips were slightly raised. Late at night, there was a sudden loud noise outside the simple wooden house. Tyrion, who was curled up on the ground, opened his eyes excitedly. He got up, held his breath, and listened for a while. He glanced at Jaime, who was awake, and said, "I'll go take a look." Tyrion had 2 hatchets on his waist. Just as Jaime was about to ask Tyrion for one, the wooden door was pushed open with a clang, and a damp, cold wind blew in. Sir Adam Marbrand, dressed as a hunter, stepped forward. Tyrion tilted his head slightly, followed by a stranger. The stranger was a tall, gray-haired old man with a slight stoop and a kind face. There were many wrinkles around his prominent brown eyes. Sir Adam looked at Jaime and saw that he was in better spirits than before he left during the day. He smiled and said, "It seems that I am not late." He pointed to the strange old man standing aside and said, "I have brought someone who can heal you." Seeing everyone looking at him, the old man bowed slightly. "Good night, my name is Qyburn." Tyrion glanced at Sir Adam calmly and said, "Are you a maester? Why are you here?" Qyburn's tone was gentle. "The Citadel has deprived me of my master's chain, Lord Lannister. As for the reason why I am standing here, I think you would rather listen to Sir Adam." Tyrion grinned. "I like your answer. Something interesting must have happened here. So, do you know medical skills?" Faced with Tyrion's questioning, Qyburn's tone remained gentle. "The Citadel can deprive me of my maester's chain, but it cannot deprive me of my knowledge, my lord." Tyrion stepped aside, and Qyburn came to Jaime's side to check the injury. He put his nose up and sniffed, his brows tightening. Jaime said hoarsely, "Very bad? Will I die?" After a pause, Qyburn shook his head and replied, "The flesh and blood have deteriorated, and the rot will spread. The most comprehensive way is to amputate the entire arm." A dark look flashed across Jaime's face, but he quickly said firmly, "I just need you to clean the wound and let me try my luck." Tyrion and Sir Adam looked at each other. Tyrion raised his chin silently towards Qyburn, signaling him to proceed. Sir Adam glanced at Jaime, who had a resolute expression, and followed Tyrion. Leaning against the drafty wooden wall, Tyrion stared at Qyburn and asked in a low voice, "2 questions. How did you meet him, and can he be trusted?" Sir Adam sat directly on the ground, leaning tiredly against the wooden wall. Qyburn was once a member of the Brave Companions. Lord Tywin hired them to fight, and later they took refuge with Rose Bolton. Tyrion looked at Sir Adam. "The Boltons, that skinning family in the north? They make a lot of money selling leather? I should advise my father to stop working so hard at mining." He smirked slightly. Sir Adam glanced at him coldly. "During the plunder of the Riverlands, Vargo Hoat of the Brave Companions had a conflict with Amory Lorch and the others. That's why he left the Lannister army." Tyrion shrugged. "And then?" A look of impatience flashed across Sir Adam's face. "Qyburn and the Brave Companions got separated. I saw him helping people at the Kneeling Man, so I took him in." Tyrion's eyes narrowed. "Don't you think it's too coincidental?" Sir Adam replied coldly, "Jaime needs a doctor. If he became disabled, Jaime would rather die." Qyburn frowned. "I can save your upper arm and cut it off from the elbow, but there is no guarantee." Jaime's eyes were sharp. "Do as I ask, or I will strangle you to death." A look of regret flashed in Qyburn's eyes, and he said warmly, "Okay then, I will only remove the rot and nothing else, sir." He placed his small bag in front of him and took out the contents. "First, treat it with boiling wine. then apply nettle paste, mustard seed, and bread mold. This may work. He held a small bottle. I'll give you milk of the poppy first. It will be very painful. No need, Jaime said, not daring to sleep for fear that his hand would be gone when he woke up. This kind-looking old man made him uneasy. Qyburn insisted, Sir, it will hurt a lot. Jaime was determined. I will scream, Qyburn said helplessly. This will be very, very painful. Jaime was resolute. I'm going to scream loud and long. Qyburn pointed to the back, smiled kindly, and said, Your companion will watch me. You can rest assured and sleep, sir. Jaime did not let down his guard. No need. I just need wine. Qyburn spread his hands. Okay, lie down. I have to tie your hands first, sir. After screaming miserably for more than half an hour, Sir Jaime fainted. When the treatment was over, Tyrion came over. He glanced at Jaime, who had his eyes closed, and said, Hey, Qyburn, your skills are pretty good. Qyburn's sternness was filled with warmth. He packed up his tools. When I was with the brave companions, dealing with broken limbs was commonplace. Wherever they went, people were missing arms and legs. Interesting experience. Tyrion stared at Qyburn. So, Mr. Qyburn, why did you happen to appear at the Kneeling Man? He grinned. Don't tell me the 7 gods guided you. Qyburn stopped his movements and said slowly, Count Kleb has offered a high reward, and many people are looking for you. What attracts me most is that he promises to protect those who find you. This is what I need most. I was pretty lucky, but when I was about to give up, Sir Malbrand came to find me. Chapter 298. The Flag is Waving. The news of Edmure Tully's death soon spread to Maidenpool, causing widespread panic. When Sir Mason appeared beneath the city walls of Maidenpool with over 3,000 soldiers clad in Kleblin robes, the elderly Earl William Mouton wisely chose to surrender to ensure his family's survival. Dick Crab, a collateral member of the Crab family, married Eleanor Mouton, the eldest daughter and heiress of the Earl of Maidenpool, and became the governor of Maidenpool. Late that night, Queen Cersei's bodyguard, Osney Kettleblack, finally found the right opportunity. He quietly sneaked into the Great Sept and suffocated the sleeping High Septon with a pillow. Under the command of King Balon of the Iron Islands, more than 100 longships carried over 3,000 Ironborn northward to support Asha Greyjoy, who was invading the north. Rumor has it that Oberyn Martell, nicknamed the Red Viper, left Sunspear by ship under the orders of his brother, Prince Doran, and went to King's Landing as an envoy of Dorne. When Tyrion Lannister prepared horses just in case, he naturally chose an expensive knight's warhorse. The knight's warhorse was tall, strong, and beautiful, with powerful bursts of speed, but it required careful care and had much less endurance compared to northern warhorses. Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't be a significant disadvantage, but after Tyrion and his party were pursued by cavalry riding northern warhorses with excellent endurance, it became a fatal weakness. On the 3rd day after the northern cavalry discovered their whereabouts, Tyrion and his party had to abandon their horses, which were foaming at the mouth. The northern cavalry could appear at any moment, and they had no choice but to rely on their legs. As night fell, the fleeing group finally had a chance to catch their breath. Tyrion combed his sweat-soaked hair with trembling fingers. He could swear that he had never cursed his short legs so much in his life. If the little Squire Pod hadn't carried him at the critical moment, he would have been kneeling pitifully in front of the pursuing northern cavalry. He prayed to the 7 gods with unprecedented sincerity. Bronn, bring that bastard Grim to me quickly. Jaime, extremely pale, staggered over with the support of Sir Adam. As Jaime slowly sat down, Tyrion grinned. Brother Jaime, please pray with me. Jaime smiled weakly, paused, and then said seriously, More and more northern cavalry are chasing us. We have no horses, and it will be difficult to escape their encirclement. He moved his injured left arm slightly and continued, If we can't wait for Earl Greene tomorrow... Tyrion, we have to make a choice. He stared at his brother. I am their biggest target. You and Adam hide while I lead the others to lure the northern cavalry away. Tyrion stared at his brother for a while and said, I want to reject your kindness. If I escape alone, our father will never forgive me. Jaime frowned. Do as I say. I want you to live, my brother. Tyrion grinned. Tywin will make my life more painful than death. Jaime opened his mouth and said, Tyrion, father, he won't. We are all his sons. Tyrion seemed to mock. Tywin doesn't want me to be his son. I've known that since I was very young, Jaime. He stretched and said, rather than believing in Lord Tywin's kindness, I would rather believe or pray to the 7 gods and hope that Greene appears as soon as possible. I will give you the most affectionate kiss. Tyrion's joking did not ease the solemn atmosphere. Sir Adam, who had been silent all the time, suddenly said, Earl Kleb's reward is a mistake, which makes everyone look for us like crazy. Otherwise, our whereabouts would not have been exposed so quickly. Jaime frowned and said, Adam, without Earl Greene's bounty, at least Qyburn wouldn't come looking for us, and I wouldn't be able to sit here and listen. Tyrion smiled and said, Sir Adam, I think you're just being rational. If you meet Greene, you might be able to point out his mistakes directly. He likes Lee, standing to other people's advice. Sir Jaime glanced sideways at Tyrion, sensing his brother's malicious intentions. Adam, don't listen to him. That little wildling is very dangerous. No one can restrain his sword except Cersei. He suddenly murmured, repeating, Cersei, Cersei. After his injury improved, Jaime easily fell into Cersei's whirlpool. Tyrion shrugged, ignoring his brother's distraction, and then looked at the sullen Sir Adam. Malbrand, Jaime is just deeply in love with his sister, he said with a smile. You and Greene are both military leaders. You must be able to chat well. Jaime's worries are unnecessary. No one understands Greene better than I do. Sir Adam stared at Tyrion for a while and then said coldly, Lannister, do I look like a fool? Tyrion's exaggerated surprise was almost comical. You actually saw it? His smile suddenly faded, and he spoke in a serious tone. Sir Adam, for the sake of our shared experiences, I remind you that the Earl Kleb you mentioned is the actual ruler of the valley. Don't cause trouble for the Lannisters just because you can't control your tongue. Tyrion's strange-colored eyes bore into Sir Adam's stiff face as he spoke each word deliberately. Do you understand? After a pause, Adam Malbrand nodded slowly. Tyrion suddenly smiled. Sir, according to my analysis, Little Running Wolf should have led troops to chase us early the next morning after we escaped Riverrun. The land under our feet is Little Running Wolf's territory. We can't even find a small boat on the Red Fork River. Do you know who ordered this? The bounty offered by Greene, at the very least, prevents all the Riverlanders from becoming the eyes of the Little Running Wolf. Well, I have to admit that his methods are a bit rough. He scratched his hair and sighed. It's my fault that I underestimated Robb Stark. Seeing the pain on Tyrion's face, Sir Adam hesitated and said, You have done a good job. No one expected so many accidents. A smile gradually appeared on Tyrion's face. Adam, if we are lucky, we can still make it through tomorrow. The next day, Tyrion and the others were not so lucky. Near noon, with the thunderous sound of horse hooves, they were suddenly exposed to the sight of the Northern cavalry. 24 loyal Lannister red robes tried to stop them. The direwolf flag fluttered, and hundreds of Northern cavalry in black and gray, holding spears glowing with cold light, galloped in like a gust of wind. The red robes faced the Northern cavalry, rushing toward them without fear, but they all fell into a pool of blood. The battle ended almost instantly. Tyrion used his short legs to run and run. He saw Sir Adam falling to the ground in front of him, carrying Jaime on his back. Tyrion couldn't run anymore and was out of breath. He pulled out the short axe from his waist with difficulty. He held the axe handle tightly with his trembling hands, wondering if he would die in battle with honor. There was no trace of fear on the face of the little squire, Podrick, who held the hilt of his sword with both hands and bravely stood in front of Tyrion. The North's military bugle sounded, and the galloping Northern cavalry slowly slowed down their horses. Jaime and Adam climbed up. Tyrion and Jaime looked at each other, and the four of them each clenched their weapons. At this time, the low and long bugle sound came again, but from another direction. Tyrion immediately followed the sound and saw the swamp Marigold flag waving. He cried, Chapter 299, The Art of War. With the sound of synchronized hoofbeats, rows of cavalry slowly emerged. They were dressed in uniform blue robes, and the silver plate armor on their bodies reflected dazzling light in the sun. In the middle were Tyrion and others, and the cavalry on both sides stopped their horses in tacit agreement. Under the direwolf flag were various attires, such as chainmail, ringmail shirts, and animal furs, while under the swamp Marigold flag were uniform and neat blue robes and bright silver plate armor. They were both descendants of the ancestors, but they looked like a collision between barbarism and civilization. Greene Kleb glanced at Tyrion and Jaime, who were in a state of embarrassment, more than 100 yards apart. He looked towards the opposite side and, with a focused look, spotted a man with a pointed crown under the largest flag. Rubbing his thumb against his index finger, after a moment, Greene lightly kicked the horse's belly, and the horse paced forward, followed closely by Brienne, holding Kleb's flag high. Click, click, click. Greene stared at Robb Stark, who also approached with his flag-bearer. No matter who was really behind the scenes, Robb, who was good at fighting, was indeed adept at consuming the Lannister army. Therefore, from his perspective, that person was a formidable opponent. The distance closed, with Tyrion and others in between. Greene and Robb tightened their reins and stopped their horses almost simultaneously. Sheathing his sword, Jaime sat down directly on the ground, as if he were basking in the sun in his back garden. Tyrion, who had strapped on his hatchet, leaned on Jaime's shoulder and looked at Greene and Robb with a smile. From the corner of his eye, Greene saw the beggar brothers who were pretending to be cool at this time, the unshakable pride of the big family, or was it the Westeros version that as long as he was not embarrassed, others would be embarrassed? He really couldn't see it. Greene showed a stiff, friendly smile towards Robb and waved. "Are you Robb from the Stark family?" After Greene's words fell, Robb frowned, and his bannerman said loudly, "In front of you is the King of the North and the Trident, the King of the West, Robb of the Stark family. King Kashiwa." Greene. Fortunately, King Grim had asked Daenerys for advice on titles before leaving the valley, and he raised his hand towards Brienne. Although Brienne had a dull character, she was full of courage when facing her responsibilities. Moving her plump lips, Brienne spoke loudly. "The person in front of you is the Earl of Crabclaw Peninsula, the conqueror and ruler of the valley, the supreme commander of the Crabclaw Peninsula Archers and Valley Cavalry, Greene Kleb." Robb. After Brienne finished speaking, Greene added, "I am a good friend of Jaime Lannister and Tyrion Lannister." Robb's eyes were cold. "Grim Kleb, you cannot take away a living Lannister." Greene spread his hands and replied calmly, "It is possible, but if the war starts now, you may stay here forever, Robb Stark." Robb said coldly, "Including you." "Yeah." Greene readily agreed with Robb's hypothesis. After a pause, he continued, "As the ruler of a large land and the commander-in-chief of the army, why would you push yourself into danger with your own hands, Robb Stark?" He glanced at Robb's flag officer with pity. "If you lose your life here, haven't you thought about the consequences? Or don't you think about the vassals and warriors who follow your flag?" Robb's eyes were bloodshot. He gritted his teeth and said, "Lannister killed my wife and uncle, and the blood debt can only be paid with blood. No matter how clever your tongue is, it can't extinguish the fire of my hatred." Greene glanced at the two Lannister brothers suspiciously and asked Robb, "Are you sure they are the murderers?" Robb first calmed down the raging anger in his heart, then said, "I will conduct a fair trial. If they are not the murderers, I will ensure their safety." Greene shook his head in amusement and said, "Robb Stark, you do not have the power to judge Jaime and Tyrion. The only one who can judge them is King Joffrey Baratheon, who sits on the Iron Throne." Robb's face darkened. Greene's slender fingers tapped the hilt of Lady Kongji's ruby-encrusted sword as he spoke calmly. "For Duke Ned's sake, I can give you a choice. Either fight, or—" He paused, then added curiously, "Why are you wearing that pointed thing on your head? Will Duke Ned need to swear allegiance to you then?" The tension in the air was palpable. Robb didn't notice that Greene was referring to his father by his nickname, Ned. He gritted his teeth and roared, "Greene Kleb!" Tyrion wanted to laugh, but knew better. Stark's sword was still hanging above their heads, so he chose to look up at the sky silently. Sir Jaime, however, didn't care and smiled, his dusty face showing his amusement. Robb calmed down again. As he glared coldly at Greene, Sir Leonard suddenly left the team and rode towards them. Seeing this, Menton kicked his horse's belly and immediately galloped to Greene's position. Sir Leonard's voice came first. "King Robb, I have something important to report. Rob's eyes slowly returned to Greene before he turned his head to look at Sir Leonard. The sound of hooves echoed as Sir Leonard arrived. He lowered his voice in Rob's ear. Your Majesty, the sentry detected at least 2 groups of cavalry gathering here. The flags are swamp marigolds and dust. Feiyong, there are thousands of them, and they can arrive in half an hour at most. Rob frowned for a moment, then suddenly looked at Greene and said coldly, Are you delaying time on purpose? His eyes were sharp. It seems the Lannisters are not only your friends, they are also your bait. Greene shrugged, his tone regretful. It seems you have seen through my wolf-hunting plan. Rob snorted coldly. He looked at Jaime sitting on the ground and said, Kingslayer, I hope you have better luck next time. I will wait for you on the battlefield. Then he glanced coldly at Greene, decisively turned his horse's head, and rode away. After taking a shower and changing into clean clothes, Tyrion stared blankly at the branch tied to the pony's tail. After a while, he pointed at Greene's masterpiece and said, In other words, you used this thing to scare away the little running wolf? Greene tossed a wine bag to Tyrion and said, The thing is simple, but when the distance is well controlled, it can create the illusion of a large number of cavalry riding horses. This is the art of war. Lord Greene had temporarily styled himself as another war artist in Westeros. Tyrion laughed. The Duke of Mace's art of war? I will have to ask him for advice when I have time. After a few more jokes, Tyrion seemed to notice Bronn beside him. He pointed at Bronn's blue robe with an exaggerated expression. My guard captain, have you finally betrayed me? Bronn showed his signature lewd smile. Master Tyrion, I will always be yours. As for this beautiful robe, he bowed to Greene gracefully and continued. Seeing that my clothes were in disgrace, the generous and kind Earl rewarded me. Greene smiled and held out 5 fingers towards Tyrion. Tyrion opened the cork of the wine bag, took a sip, and grinned. A very fair price. As they were about to set off, Tyrion suddenly remembered Qyburn, whom they had left near the bent-knee pillar. Bronn soon received the task of bringing him back. Chapter 300, Tempting Reward. Towards evening, Greene and his party camped in an uninhabited village near the river avenue. In the only stone house, Jaime Lannister, who had been cleaned up, lay with his eyes closed, looking like a haggard, delicate flower. Greene looked at Jaime, who seemed to have fallen asleep for a while, then sat on the short wooden stake next to him. After a pause, he stretched out a finger and pressed on Jaime's wound. Jaime screamed in pain. Hiss, damn little savage! Jaime cursed. Greene smiled and said, When you are pretending to sleep, you should pay attention to your breathing, sir. Jaime glanced sideways at Greene. He moved and sat on the bed, leaning against the stone wall. His lips trembled as if he had something to say. He held it in for a long time, but in the end he just sighed softly, looking at the spider web above and keeping silent. Greene took the initiative and said, Sir Jaime, did you gain anything from this trip to the Riverlands? Have you found your knight's heart? After a moment of silence, Jaime suddenly laughed at himself. It would be better to say it was a trip to the prison cells of Riverrun. Greene's eyebrows raised slightly. Are you feeling ashamed because of this incident, so you pretend to be asleep? Jaime shook his head slightly. I'm worried that I can't help but ask you. After saying that, he paused, looked at Greene, and said directly, You know everything? Seeing Greene looking at him doubtfully, Jaime opened his mouth and said, It's about me and Cersei. You and Queen Cersei? Greene muttered, then spread his hands and said, I can only say, there are no secrets in the Red Keep. I also hope that what you are asking about is not what I guessed. Jaime stared at Greene for a while and suddenly said, How did you practice sword and tongue together? Before Greene could react, he shook his head again. Forget it, even if I have a clumsy tongue, Cersei. It was because Jaime learned about Queen Cersei's betrayal of him that the white-robed knight, who had always been high-spirited, fell into self-doubt. Lord Greene blinked, and Jaime's blonde hair seemed to glow with green. Blinking again. Well, an illusion. Lancel. After a pause, Jaime said again, Cersei and Lancel, is this true? Greene asked doubtfully, What's the matter? What can she do with him? Jaime got angry. Little savage, others may not know it, but I know it. I know you have a pair of eagle eyes. After speaking for a while, he slowed down, with annoyance in his voice. I'm sorry. I'm eager for confirmation. I know I shouldn't be like this, but as long as I think about Cersei, I can't stay rational. Greene reached out and patted Jaime on the shoulder and said, "Do you need me to help you find a good reason?" Jaime twisted his shoulder and shook off Greene's palm. But it involved the wound on his arm, and he hissed in pain. Greene smiled happily. Jaime glanced sideways at Greene, who was gloating about his misfortune, and said angrily, "I'll listen." Greene pinched his chin and said slowly, "At that time, I don't think anyone could have expected that Tyrion could lead thousands of gold cloaks to severely damage Stannis' army of 100,000, and no one could have expected that Lannister and Tyrell reinforcements would appear outside King's Landing in time." His brown eyes looked at Jaime. "I think most people at that time thought they would fall under Stannis' sword. The shadow of death shrouded the Red Keep, so if something crazy happened, it would be normal." Greene's reasoning gave Jaime a bright light in his originally dim eyes, and he murmured, "It's my fault. If I was by her side, I shouldn't have left." Jaime would wake up sooner or later. Lord Greene just made his trip to the Red Keep slightly more difficult. A true knight is not afraid of tests. Cough. There was silence for a while. After Greene said, "Have a good rest," and was about to leave, Jaime suddenly said, "Earl Greene, tell me the truth. Have you?" Greene turned his head to look at Jaime, who was staring at him intently. He frowned and said, "Sir, did you lose your knight's heart in the cell at River Run?" Without waiting for a response, he stepped forward. Just as he was about to reach the door, he paused and turned back to Jaime, who seemed lost in thought. "The Light of the West, the Queen Regent, is charming and noble," Greene said, a slight smirk playing on his lips. "Sir, you reminded me. I heard someone plans to expel her from King's Landing. Whack, she must be feeling helpless and pitiful now." His smirk widened. "Perhaps this time I really have a chance to be personally rewarded by Queen Cersei. It's quite exciting." As he closed the door behind him, Jaime's muffled roars of anger and challenges to duels could be heard faintly. Outside, under a tree, Tyrion leaned casually with his arms folded, one foot tapping the ground lightly. Despite his appearance, he exuded a certain charm. "I can feel my brother's joy," Tyrion remarked with a wry smile as Greene approached. "Did it work, Greene?" Greene shrugged and chuckled. "I hope it works." Tyrion's smile turned slightly uneasy. "Your laughter makes me a little nervous." The two walked towards a nearby bonfire and sat down. Greene took a sip from a wine bag and said, "Tyrion, let's head to Maidenpool first. Once Jaime recovers from his injury, we can go south to King's Landing." Tyrion's eyes twinkled mischievously. Maidenpool? Legend has it that Florian, one of the legendary heroes from the Age of Heroes, peeked at Jonquil and her sisters bathing there. What a splendid idea. Greene nodded thoughtfully. "It's rumored that the spring water in Maidenpool has magical healing properties. We can test it on Sir Jaime." Tyrion laughed, but then grew serious. "Miss Mouton, the younger brother of the Earl of Maidenpool, was killed by Robert I at the Battle of the Bells. The Mouton family harbors hatred for the Baratheons and has long since surrendered to Littlefinger. Will they welcome our visit?" Greene remained calm. "The former Earl of Maidenpool, William Mouton, handed over the governorship to my people. Dick Crab is set to marry Earl William's heir. If we time it right, we might even catch their wedding." Tyrion looked at Greene, intrigued. "Earl Mouton seems surprisingly generous?" Greene smiled. Earl William's generosity was encouraged by the presence of Crab's army at his doorstep. Tyrion grinned, understanding. "We should hasten our pace. I enjoy attending weddings, especially at night." His smile faded as he added seriously, "May I remind you to bring more people with us to King's Landing? They can protect me as well. I suspect my gentle sister is sharpening her knife every day, just waiting to cut me into pieces." Greene paused and asked, "I heard that Duke Tywin intended to marry Queen Cersei to someone from River Run. Was that your idea?" Tyrion spread his hands helplessly. "River Run is a good place, but Sister Cersei always misunderstands her well-meaning brother." "I can only imagine Queen Cersei's anger towards you," Greene said, patting Tyrion's shoulder insincerely. "Sir Jaime will help you. Queen Cersei will likely keep you in a dark cell for a few days at most. Don't worry." Tyrion feigned anger. "Greene, I think you're gloating over my misfortune. We are as close as brothers." He rolled his eyes and added, "Perhaps I can stay in Maidenpool for a while and return after Cersei gets married." Greene quickly shattered Tyrion's dream. "Do you think Queen Cersei will cooperate obediently? Also, don't forget, you are the finance minister of the Royal Council. Duke Tywin will never allow it." Tyrion scratched his head and complained, "I only know how to use money, but I don't know how to deal with this mess." Tyrion sighed. "The old lion must have let me take that position because he couldn't find a single bronze star in the kingdom's treasury. Now, I have to figure out a way to make Cersei happy. It's too difficult. I don't even know if she likes watching me dance." Greene replied in a disgusted tone, "If you squirm in front of Queen Cersei, she'll take it as a provocation. Not even Jaime will be able to save you then, I promise, Tyrion." Tyrion laughed, crossing his short legs. "Greene, everyone in the Seven Kingdoms knows you're Cersei's favorite. I won't embarrass you. Please help me think of a way." His expression turned vulgar. "Everyone knows you're the best at serving her." Ignoring Tyrion's joke, Greene thought for a moment and said, "You rescued Jaime from Riverrun, which should calm most of Queen Cersei's anger." Tyrion took a sip of wine from his wine bag, wiped the corners of his mouth with the back of his hand, and said, "Cersei's gratitude is short-lived, and she holds grudges better than anyone." His eyes were complicated, especially against me. Greene also took a sip of wine and said, "It seems we can only find a way through marriage. Regarding this matter, I think Queen Cersei will be willing to talk to you." The Reach, Highgarden. Margaery Tyrell's steps were quicker than usual, her slim and charming waist swaying gracefully. Her chin was slightly raised, and her light body moved with purpose. The servants in the corridor stood aside and bowed. Margaery's elk-like eyes gently scanned everyone who saluted her, a gentle smile on her face. Standing in front of the church door, Margaery nodded slightly. The two waiters standing on either side of the door bent down and slowly opened the oak door. Entering the church, Margaery's beautiful eyes moved slightly towards the direction of the Virgin statue, where Lady Olenna stood quietly. Lifting her skirt gracefully, Margaery whispered, "Grandma." With her back turned, Lady Olenna first dabbed at the corner of her eyes with a crystal handkerchief, then turned around and said, "Are you here to take me back, my Margaery?" Lady Olenna was holding a crutch in one hand and staggering. Margaery quickly came over to hold her arm. As she got closer, Margaery noticed the tears in the corners of her grandmother's eyes, which made her heart skip a beat. Just as she was about to speak, Lady Olenna stopped and slowly glanced at the statues of the seven gods. "This is really not a good place for an old woman like me," Lady Olenna said. "Grandma?" Margaery said helplessly. Lady Olenna walked tremblingly with Margaery's support. "The gods in the sky have no time to pay attention to the nagging of a mortal old woman," she said. The more she talked, the angrier she became. "If the gods were merciful, they would not leave me with two crippled grandsons." At this moment, Margaery wished her father, who had rushed to King's Landing, would appear here. Only the Duke of Metz could attract most of her grandmother's anger. Little Rose immediately stopped her thoughts. As a daughter, she shouldn't think like this. She felt very worried and guilty. The closed door creaked open again. Outside the church was a colorful rose garden. Lady Olenna and Margaery walked in the garden, the breeze bringing bursts of floral fragrance and the chirping of birds. Lady Olenna was still angry. "Margaery, I regret more and more why I didn't stop it in the first place. I should have refused harshly. I should not have allowed young Loras to become Renly's squire. Renly, who loves acting, Renly, who only knows how to act, deceived me, an old woman. Sooner or later, this old woman will go to the seven hells to settle the account with him." Today, Lady Olenna was much angrier than usual. Margaery was very worried. She had to betray her father. "Grandma, although you were reluctant to let Loras leave Highgarden, you had no choice. At that time, my father had already agreed." Lady Olenna paused, her gaze fixed on her well-behaved and clever granddaughter. She seemed lost in thought, recalling past events. After a moment, she nodded and said, "Yes, I remember. It was my foolish son's decision." She snorted coldly, her voice tinged with anger. "Stupid Duke Boar." After a few more curses, Lady Olenna finally calmed down. She spoke kindly. "Margaery, I'm tired from walking. Let's find a place to sit for a war. Hyle." "Yes, Grandma." Margery replied with a sweet smile, silently praying in her heart, "Gods, forgive me." They sat down in a pavilion in the garden. Lady Olenna took a sip of tea and signaled the maids to give them some privacy. Her wrinkled hand gently patted the smooth, delicate back of her granddaughter's hand. "Margery, my Margery, the future queen of the Seven Kingdoms. You are exceptional, not as foolish as my son. When he gets anxious, he only blushes and puffs up his cheeks." Patting Margery's hand again, Lady Olenna leaned back in her chair. "Is there any specific news?" she asked. Margery nodded slightly. "Yes, Grandma, we can now confirm that at the wedding banquet in Riverrun, both Edmure Tully and Jane Westerling died of poisoning. However, they were poisoned with two different substances." "Jane Westerling, the little wolf's bride," Lady Olenna muttered, taking another sip of tea, her eyes deep in thought. "We can also confirm that there was another person hidden at the wedding in Riverrun." Margery's curiosity was piqued. "Grandma, who could that person be?" Lady Olenna put down her teacup and stared intently at Margery. "That's enough. Put away your useless curiosity and do not let anyone continue to investigate. This matter ends here."